A heads up for the introductions portion. We do have a new staff introduction to make.
Okay, so that would be under introduction of special guests.
Yes, please.
Okay, that'll
Thank you.
work. And do I see Cesar on? Yeah.
He is on.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be okay. The morning's been a little challenging, but so I may hand it off, but I'm going to try to push through. But I think everything's going to be fine.
Okay.
Just want to give you a heads up. You bet.
Thank you.
And Chair, just so you know, we do have Vice Chair Molina, as we know, Director Gilmore, Secretary Burke, and then we also have Mayor Wilcox, who will be sitting in on behalf of Director Costa today. And
Yes.
All of those individuals are currently present, so we do have a quorum.
Okay, so we ready to get started?
If you are.
All right. Okay, well, we will call this meeting of the Board of Directors special call meeting of DCTA to order. It is April the 7th, 2021. It is 10:01 a.m. We will have the invocation. Let's just sort of have a moment of silence so that we can, focus on those that are important to us and the issues and things in our own lives and those in our families, please. Thank you all. All right, we have introduction of special guests.
All right, I am most delighted to introduce the newest member to the DCTA team, Keisha Morris Perkins. She is physically distanced from Lindsay in Lindsay's office today. She is shadowing Lindsay for this meeting. But Keisha is our new Executive Assistant Board Process Manager. So she will be the support for the board and will be the liaison between DCTA staff and the board, filling the role that was vacated by Brandy Padron. Keisha comes to us with about 4 years of federal corrections experience, 16 years of municipality experience, and 9 years as a city secretary. This position that she holds here at DCTA is very similar to a city secretary position. So her experience that she has is going to be a great asset to hit the ground running here at DCTA. So our hope is that she'll be running the April 22nd meeting that we have planned. So you'll start seeing emails from her. This is day 3 for her. So we're kind of working on the training process and getting her incorporated. So just wanted to introduce you so that way whenever you see an email come from her, you'll know who that is.
Fantastic. Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Look forward to your support and to your contribution. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll go on then to public comment. And Lindsay, I believe you provided me with some public comment that I'm to read. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, and this public comment is from Eric Pruitt. And Eric's comments are, I'd like to voice my support for phase 1, supplemental 5, bike racks on at least some vehicles, so the capability to carry bicycles, which we currently have on buses, is retained. I do have broader concerns about whether DCTA is coordinating effectively with member cities to combine land use and transit policy to serve a broader group of riders than is currently served and help those cities accomplish their long-range plans. This proposal seems to trade potential bus efficiency, which goes unrealized due to member cities' land use policies, for a broader service area and reduced wait times. I worry that higher marginal costs disincentivize ridership growth due to lower efficiency, but I also see how efficient frequent transit is not economical with the current land use policies of member cities. I look forward to participating in the public feedback sessions on this proposal and thank the board for your efforts. Did we have any more public comment?
No, sir, we did not.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Eric, for your contribution and look forward also to your feedback in the public process. Then we'll move on to our regular agenda. And our agenda number 1 is receive a presentation, discuss and consider FIA's proposal number 4.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. I'm using a new laptop today, so I just wanted to make sure. Today, VIA will present to the board their proposal number 4, which is the result of all of the feedback that was provided as part of the member city roundtable discussions. And just as a reminder, a copy of the comprehensive roundtable feedback was shared last month with the board, but we also included it in today's packet just as a reference. So during today's discussion, we do hope to accomplish several things. The first being obviously having VIA present their proposal number 4 and answering any board questions. The second would be determining the services that staff plans to include in the upcoming public involvement process, which kicks off on April 19th. We also want to make sure that staff has adequate information in order to develop a task order with VIA so that we can bring that back to the board on April 22nd for consideration. And then we will be requesting board approval of proposal number 4 today, along with any modifications that are made as part of today's discussion. As we've mentioned before, the purpose of bringing proposal number 4 to the board today to review and for consideration for approval is because it's a pivotal step in our process forward in order to kind of march toward an estimated launch date of September 7th, 2021. So approval of the service plan today will provide staff with the necessary information that they need to inform the public involvement process, which is kind of a critical step in order to ensure that we can meet the September 7th estimated deadline. I do want to call out that the VIA presentation in your packet does kind of showcase 2 different cost models. The first is a mixed fleet, which we've discussed before, where DCTA would be providing 9 RBOC or cutaway vehicles as part of the fleet. And the second is a singular fleet where VIA would provide all of their vehicles through their lease agreement with Avis. After careful consideration and a lot of discussion with VIA, DCTA staff is recommending a singular fleet model. So we will review both models today, but I did upfront want to preface that staff is recommending a singular fleet model due to some of the licensing requirements that VIA has provided if we were to use the 9 RBOC vehicles, but also due to the fact that there is a minimal cost difference and that the efficiencies that would be created from an operational and reporting perspective just make a lot of sense for us to use a singular fleet. And this recommendation does align with VIA's preferred path forward. But as we go through the presentation today, we would be happy to answer any questions related to kind of those 2 cost models. And before handing it off to VIA, I would like to mention that VIA is going to be sharing a presentation that differs slightly from the presentation that was included in your packet, but they will call out any of those differences. They did make some additional tweaks since we included the presentation in the packet. So you will see some slight differences, but they're fully prepared to call out those differences as they go through the presentation. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Lainey Cloud, who's the Central Partnerships lead for VIA.
Awesome, perfect. Hi, good morning, everyone. We're really, oh, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, excellent. Awesome. So we're really excited to be here with you guys today. There have been a lot of meetings and work streams. Just want, I think, to start and kick off by saying thank you to the DCTA staff who have been so collaborative and frankly fun to work with on this project. So thank you all. We've had the privilege of actually working with a variety of teams within DCTA, the great folks at Accenture, as well as kind of getting to know all of the member cities during the roundtable session. So just want to start by saying thank you, and we're excited to continue all of you to bring this vision to life. So I'll just maybe start with a quick round of introductions on our end. We have 3 folks from VIA. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Lainey Cloud. I oversee the central region for VIA. I'm based in San Antonio, born and raised, and excited to, again, kind of be having this conversation with you guys today. So I'll pass it over to Kyla for a quick intro on her end as well.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Kyla, and I am Director of Service Design at VIA. Which means that I have been working with all of you or a lot of you to identify what zones might be most interesting and impactful for DCTA and ultimately what that would cost. And I will pass it on to Alex.
Hey everyone, thanks for having us today. My name is Alex Lavoie. I'm the Global Head of Operations here at VIA. I had the pleasure of working with the DCTA team as we prepared our proposal. And also my team will be ultimately sort of responsible for running this service once it launches. So excited to chat more with you today.
Perfect. Kyla, do you want to go ahead and share your screen? We can just kind of hop right in. Perfect. You can go to the next slide. Awesome. Okay, so just to kick us off here, so not even a giant statewide freeze was going to stop the momentum for this project. So we hosted roundtable discussions with Denton, Highland Village, and Louisville in early March, which a handful of you were a part of, and thank you again for joining. So it was our intention during these meetings to get feedback and suggestions from you all to incorporate or at least consider as a part of the overall service plan. And so what you'll see throughout this presentation is our revised proposal structured in the following way. So we've really broken this out into 2 phases. So phase 1 includes our base plan, which has 2 core zones in Denton and then Louisville and Highland Village. We will then transition into phase 1 add-ons, which were suggestions and feedback from the roundtables and options that you all have asked us to kind of explore and price out. So we'll review each of those. And then based on board's feedback today, any of these add-on options can be added on top of that base plan to be included in the initial launch or phase 1 launch of this service. We'll then move into phase 2 options, which are just additional options that could, potentially have timing implications, such as, access or our paratransit service. And then any add-ons, maybe from phase 1 that maybe we want to push a little bit later into the service plan. Following some conversations with DCTA staff, we've also put together a few slides on VIA's recommendation and proposal. But of course, we will lean heavily on board feedback, as you all are the local experts within your communities. Awesome. Okay, so and as we're going through the presentation, the costs associated will be presented as a not to exceed amount, which means that these numbers the worst case scenario, for lack of a better way to say that, but will not exceed that amount. And then just to echo Nicole, I think the goals for today are to review this revised proposal, confirm the specific add-ons the board would like to include for phase 1 and phase 2, and of course answer any and all questions about the proposed plan. You can go to the next slide, Kyla. So just a couple of notes on pricing as we go through the presentation. First, all pricing excludes the potential fare box or advertising revenue, which could be potential cost savings for DCTA. Second, there are quite a few add-on options that we have explored and included in the presentation today, and the potential combinations of all of those, that matrix is actually large. So we have kind of simplified this across the board and have assumed 1 constant rate per vehicle hour for both the mixed fleet and singular fleet scenarios. So in the mixed fleet scenario, where DCTA provides those 9 cutaways, the rate is $37.26. For the singular fleet, so the all Avis or all VIA, the per vehicle hour rate is $41.06. And then obviously, as we kind of potentially add multiple add-ons, this rate could change very, very slightly, but we think this was just kind of a simplified way of looking at this. And then lastly, some of the add-ons can be served, using the existing fleet of 25 vehicles. So for example, Sunday service, which is one of the options, would require 20 of the 25 vehicles. But for add-ons where we would need to add actually extra vehicles into the fleet, you'll see the word extra on the slide, and we'll be sure to call this out as we go through as well. And then just in terms of the kind of structure for today, we're thinking it may be best for us to just kind of quickly go through this whole presentation and all of these add-on options, just to provide full context and kind of a comprehensive view to the board. But then leave a majority of our time today, of course, for us to kind of go back and dig into questions and into each one of these add-ons. So if that's okay with y'all, please be writing down your questions. And again, we'll leave plenty of time to circle back and discuss. So I will pass it to Kyla now to kind of walk through the evolution of how we got to where we are today.
Great, thank you, Lainey. So we thought it was going to be helpful to talk through a little bit about how these zones have evolved based on your feedback. The original proposed zone that you see on the left is what we initially submitted with our RFP response. Following some more conversations that we had, we included basically a much larger zone that fully encompassed all of the replaced fixed line routes. And then lastly, after the roundtable, we have investigated a few different zone additions, primarily for the Denton area, this Denia neighborhood extension that you see in the black there on the left. And so again, this Denia neighborhood, this is going to be one of the add-ons that we're going to go over, and you will hear a little bit more about that in a few slides. Here is a view of the Highland Village and Louisville zone. Again, you can see that it expanded pretty drastically from our original proposal to January, and then, of course, a little bit more after the roundtable discussions. So the primary differences here between January and today, Highland Village zone, previously we had excluded parts of the Highland Village zone, and we received the feedback that these areas were previously covered by the lift service that you had, and we have included those as part of the base scenario. And we were able to do that because also as part of the roundtable discussions, one option that we had included in the base scenario was a replacement of the North Texas Express line Route 64. And following the roundtable discussions, a decision was made that we are actually going to remove Route 64 and send that to community for public feedback. So Highland Village has been included as part of the base scenario in the next slides. Flower Mound, there were parts of Flower Mound that had originally been included in our initial proposal and the January modification. We removed the parts of Flower Mound from the zone today. And the other piece of feedback that we received from the roundtable discussions was the addition of some of the low to moderate income zones and employment centers that Accenture had identified in their report. So we have also gone ahead and included those. And again, those are going to be included at no extra cost because we've been able to offset that with the removal of the Flower Mound zone. A couple of other add-ons. There was a First Park 121. This is a business area that is basically on the way on Highway 121 going east. And this was one of the business centers that was identified by Accenture as well. That zone, it's relatively small, and given that there are two other add-ons that we're considering, this Business 121 extension where you have the big shopping hour area and the Texas Roadhouse out there, that First Park 121, we're going to be able to include that at no cost, provided that we are able to do either this Business 121 extension or the Castle Hills extension. And just to explain a little bit more on the reasoning there, basically, if we're already driving through that zone and picking up or dropping off more people in some of these larger areas like Castle Hills or along those shopping centers, we believe that we're going to be able to include First Park with no additional cost. And I will pass it back to Lainey to explain quickly about the base service, and then we'll start getting into some of the add-ons.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyla. So before we dig into the base service and add-ons, I thought it might be helpful just to take a tiny step back and just ensure we understand how this service will actually work. So I won't spend a ton of time here, as y'all likely know this already, but thought it was just worth a very quick recap. So what we're providing DCTA is on-demand, dynamically routed public transit. So on demand meaning riders can call a ride anytime. Dynamically routed meaning there are no kind of rigid fixed stops or schedules for the service. And then public transit, meaning this is open to anyone and everyone, and providing an equitable and accessible service is extremely critical. So our algorithms will optimize for shared rides by matching riders that are heading in kind of the same general direction to share a vehicle to their end destination. So from a rider perspective, how this works is through the app, you will set your pickup and your drop-off location. And of course, if you don't have a smartphone, there are other ways to book, such as a web portal, GoPass, or just through calling in. The app will then present a rider with a proposal, including the exact pickup location, their wait time, and the appropriate fare for that rider. They'll be asked to walk to their virtual bus stop location, which is usually, kind of just down the street or kind of the nearest street corner, which is where they will be picked up. A quick note here is that there are quite a few ways in which we can configure the algorithm and how we set up the service. So for example, how far people are walking to these virtual bus stops is just one kind of lever that we can pull up or down. So one example of this is likely in the middle of July. As y'all all know, down here in Texas, people are not going to walk very far when it's 110 degrees out, right? So another example of this is if a rider requires a wheelchair or it's a senior rider with limited mobility needs, the driver will pick them up right at the curb. So the algorithm here can be configured specifically for DCTA and kind of the appropriate level of service for that particular rider. From there, the rider will be picked up in a DCTA branded vehicle. Once on board, they'll be able to kind of track their location, see upcoming drop-off and pickups that are happening within their trip and their arrival ETA. And then actually after their trip, we can capture their ride rating as well. So this may have all gone without saying, but just wanted to kind of confirm we were all on the same page here with the overall experience before we really dig into the details. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so our base plan here. So at the kind of core service, we're proposing two key zones. So one zone in Denton that you can see there to the north, and then one zone in Highland Village in Louisville that you can see below that. So we're proposing service 6 days a week, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Monday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Fridays, and 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Saturdays. And we're suggesting that the trips must start and end within the same zone. So you can travel anywhere within each one of these zones, but not necessarily take trips between the zones. The service will require 25 vehicles for a total of 94,000 service hours. Our year one ridership estimates are between 280,000 and 470,000, though we expect that we'll see a significant increase as we kind of get further and further away from COVID. And the cost that you see there reflects the mixed fleet option there on the left, and then the singular fleet option there on the right. Anything else to add here, Kyla, on the base option?
So I think the only thing that I would add is this is just a flag that this is a change from what you might be seeing in the either in the printout that you have or the presentation that was shared earlier last week. So on each of our slides, we are going to include two costs at the bottom. So the first cost is going to be with a mixed fleet, and the second cost is going to be with a singular fleet. Alex, I think
one other quick point to that, which is that the cost for the singular fleet reflects the cost that DCTA would have from VIA. Doesn't reflect sort of any additional incremental costs that DCTA may have internally to sort of fuel, maintain, or insure those vehicles.
Absolutely. So I think that's what Nicole was saying earlier, that the cost difference is actually quite minimal. It's not fully represented in these numbers because we don't have some of those insurance or fuel or maintenance costs.
Okay, so let me make sure I understood what you just said. The 3.5 on the mixed fleet, that does not include any related DCTA costs, i.e. maintenance, fuel, insurance, those kinds of things. Was that what you said?
That's
Or
correct.
spec-
Yeah, exactly. So that would just be the cost that that DCTA would be paying.
Okay.
Yeah, but there would be for those 9 vehicles in the mixed fleet that are DCTA owned, there would be some costs that DCTA would face sort of internally. So this is just the VIA cost for those. And then the 3.9 would assume a singular fleet, which is entirely VIA provided. So that would be encompassing sort of all costs in that case.
So real quick on a clarification, and I'll hold the rest of my questions. I know on the original proposals where you had the 3 pricing models, I think it was proposal 1, 2, 3, 4, and you had various add-ons. The base price I thought was 3.5 or 3.6 million originally. Am I off on that, or and if so, okay, but if not, what's the difference? Was that a singular fleet or a mixed fleet? Do you know the cost in which I'm referring to?
Yeah, Chris. So the 3.5 million was the initial proposal that we shared was for the mixed fleet.
Okay, all right, fair enough. All right, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
And if I could just add, Chair Watts, staff did conduct an analysis of to kind of determine what the annual cost would be to provide fuel maintenance and insurance for those 9 cutaways. We were unable to calculate the insurance cost simply because we needed insurance contract requirements from other parties, but we did estimate the fuel and the maintenance, and that's coming in roughly at about $355,000 per year.
Okay.
And so that kind of led into our recommendation of a singular fleet.
Sure, that makes sense. Absolutely, thank you.
Perfect. So with that, I will take us through all of the add-ons. You know, with each, we obviously VIA was participating in all of the roundtable discussions with each member city, but I recognize that not everybody on this call was, you know, on all of those meetings. So I'm going to try to give as much background and context on maybe why some of these add-ons were requested, in addition to just, you know, what it will, you know, how many vehicles they'll need and what it would cost. And then at the end of all of the add-ons, one other change to the packet that you received was we didn't have any recommendation or proposal on what add-ons or what phases we would do. And we received the feedback and discussions from Nicole that it might be helpful for us to present what we would propose doing in terms of phases. So once I'm done going through all of the add-ons, I'm going to have a few slides that talk about what our proposal would be and why, and then we'll kind of open it up for discussion and questions. Perfect. So the first add-on that we are taking a look at here is Sunday and holiday service. This one is pretty straightforward. It's basically allowing for Sundays to have service between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then that would also add 10 holidays per year that would follow that same Sunday schedule. Very similar to our base scenario, rides would be, you know, allowable between Denton to Denton or within that southern area, Louisville and Highland Village, within that zone. But we would not allow rides to travel between Louisville and Denton in this example. And for Sunday service, looking at both the data that we received from you for the green line, we were able to estimate that we would need about 15 vehicles for the service, about 9,300 service hours, and with a cost of, I'll kind of just give the cost of the single fleet, which would be 380,000. And that is the yearly not to exceed amount for year 1. The next add-on is a Saturday service hours extension. The background on this add-on, our base proposal had Saturday service hours ending at 8 p.m. And on Friday, they end at 11 p.m. And so the question was raised, well, you know, if people are presumably using the service until 11 p.m. on Friday, I'm assuming they're also going out to dinner or, you know, hopefully soon everyone is going out to dinner and stuff like that post-pandemic. So the idea is why not have the service extend also on Saturday night? So This is an add-on to add 3 additional service hours only on Saturdays. So instead of ending at 8 p.m., the service would end at 11 p.m. But again, the service would be the same, Denton to Denton or Louisville Highland Village to Louisville Highland Village. And this would be an additional cost of $64,000 with the single fleet. Moving on to Denton and the Denia neighborhood. So the Denia neighborhood, this like strip that you see going out along that road, there were a number of mobile home parking areas that we identified that they could benefit from a microtransit service. So that is the background on this add-on. And the add-on, this one is a little bit tough because of the way that it kind of extends out from the service area. We do believe we would need an extra vehicle as opposed to being able to use the fleet that we already had assigned to Denton. So we don't believe that we would need the extra vehicle at all times of the day, but certainly during the peak hours. And this would result in an additional cost of $129,000. And I think I wanted to point out here, just call out that this is again a not to exceed amount. So if the demand from that area turned out not to be as high as we expected, you will only be billed for the hours that are used. You will not be billed for hours that we didn't need to use. The next add-on that we investigated was a Highland Village service hours extension. This was really a focus on the 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. time. The Lyft service that you all had there before began at 5 a.m. And so the question was raised, if the Lyft service began at 5 a.m., do we also need VIA service to begin at 5 a.m.? And so we took a look at some of the Lyft data, and just to give you a sense of the math that we did, in January 2020 was a peak month, and we saw that there were 289 rides with Lyft that month. Of the 289, that works out to about 13 rides per day, per workday. And also some data that we received data that said that between 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. represented about 0.5% of all demand, which means if you're doing 13 rides on a typical day, 0.5% is less than 1 ride. So because of that, our recommendation is not to extend the service hours just for Highland Village for that 1 hour. Okay. Next, we have Business 121, this North Zone. So this is what was deemed in the roundtable as an island service zone. And basically the background here is that there's a lot of shops in this area. This is part of the Louisville city zone. And there's also a number of housing areas over here in Lakeside. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm pointing to the Lakeside area. And so the question was asked to us to scope an add-on service for this zone. This zone, a little bit different to some of the other zones, because this is an island service, rides would be able to be booked either within that zone or to go to and from Louisville Highland Village zone. The only thing that they wouldn't be able to do would be to take it from that zone, from the Business 121 zone to Denton. So they would be able to go, anyone from Louisville or Highland Village would be able to go either to Louisville Highland Village zone or this First Park 121 or Business 121 and vice versa. Nobody would be able to take it from either of these 3 zones to Denton. So on the cost, this would also require an additional vehicle to the fleet as opposed to using the fleet that we already have. And that would be an additional vehicle that would be required at all hours, most likely. And so the not to exceed amount here is $200,000. This add-on, this speaks to what Chair Watts was one of the public comments that you mentioned at the beginning, the addition of bike racks to all of the vehicles. So bike racks to 25 vehicles is $1,500 per vehicle. So that's $37,500. The one thing that I'll call out here is if we end up going with some of these add-ons that increase the total number of vehicles in the fleet, then it would basically just be $1,500 additional per extra vehicle. Okay. I went through that one pretty quickly, but I hope that was okay. So the next option is this Frankfurt DART station. And the background here is Frankfurt DART station is just outside of this Louisville and Highland Village zone. We do have some other stations inside the zone itself, but the Frankfurt DART station happens to have a higher frequency of the green line than some of these other stations that are within the zone. So we wanted to see what it would cost to be able to allow riders to travel between Highland Village, Louisville zone and Frankfurt DART station. For the purposes of these add-ons, we're considering two potential options here. One of them is an option to have this from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. So really, the commuting hours. And that would be an additional vehicle only during those times, 103,000. And again, not to exceed 123,000. So if we don't need that extra vehicle on all of those hours, we wouldn't use it. And then the second option that we show here is Monday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Friday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. So essentially allowing users to travel to the Frankfurt DART station Monday through Friday, anytime the service is running. The reason that we also considered this option was simply from a rider communication and transparency and ease of use standpoint. It would be, pretty easy to understand if, Monday through Friday, you can also take it to the Frankfurt DART full stop, as opposed to adding an additional layer of only during these hours. So the additional cost here is not much extra for those additional hours. It's $174,000. Perfect. So those were the phase one additions that we looked at. And also as part of the conversations and our roundtables, there were a few add-ons that everyone decided was really interesting to look at and scope and consider what this would cost and whether or not they should be added. But it was also recognized that this probably wasn't going to be something that was needed in September for the launch, but something that would be considered at a later date. So this is why they've been labeled as phase two here. So the first one, phase two, is this Sunday A train replacement. And so basically the A train does not run on Sundays, and people that live either in Denton or Louisville and Highland Village do not have a way to travel between the two zones. So the idea is to provide this A train service between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays. And the rides would be able to begin in Denton and end in Denton, begin in Denton or end in Louisville and Highland Village. And they would also be able to take the service all the way down to Trinity Mills Station. Similarly, from Louisville and Highland Village, you would either be able to travel to Denton within your own zone or to Trinity Mills. Also, some more background is, if people are interested in going down to Dallas Monday through Saturday, there's probably a chance that they might be interested in going down to Dallas on Sundays as well. The additional cost here is $76,000 for that single fleet. And the one asterisk that we wanted to add here was because this is a standalone service and the way that we have scoped it, this is really a part of Sunday service. So this has been, the price, the $76,000 is assuming that you also take Sunday service. Okay, so Trinity Mills late night service. This was an add-on Basically, the concept here was let's have a safe ride home for people that are arriving at the Trinity Mill station late at night. And we received some data to help us come to a conclusion on whether or not this should be included as a phase 1 or a phase 2 or not at all. And looking at the data, the post-COVID or current COVID state that we are in, there's very few rides where people are arriving at the Trinity Mill station late at night in current conditions. And so we don't think that this is a great use case for phase 1. That being said, what's interesting to see is pre-COVID, the amount of ridership actually increased as the night went on. So it seems like people are going out late at night pre-COVID and coming back home late. And so we do think that a Trinity Mills late night service could have a lot of value to the residents of these member cities. So we do suggest to implement this as a phase 2. And so what would that cost? So Trinity Mill Station, it would be basically extending service hours by 3 hours at the end of every night. So Monday through Saturday is what we've crossed it out here. The rides, the rules of the rides and where you can take the service to is a little bit different from the standard service. So because this is a late night after hours service, let's say, the rides must begin at Trinity Mill Station, and they can be dropped off anywhere in Denton or anywhere in Highlandville and Louisville. What we don't allow is during these extra late night service hours for you to take it from Denton to Denton or from Highland Village to Louisville. So it's purely meant to be a late night service getting you home from Trinity Mill Station. The year 1, we expect that we would need about 3 vehicles. We would not need to acquire additional vehicles for this because this is a late night service. So we would be able to use some of the vehicles that we had on during the day. 2,750 hours and a cost of $112,000.
When you say year 1, are you still talking about phase 2? Or
Yes.
So
yes.
help me. So phase 1 is our implementation in, let's say, September.
Correct.
And then phase 2 is a year later. Is that correct? Or where is phase 2?
Not necessarily. So we in a couple of slides, I'll go through what
Okay,
we
that's
might
fine. I just
propose
need.
for this.
Oh, okay, and this is a not to exceed number as
Correct.
well. Okay.
Correct. This is a not to exceed number. And again, this is assuming Monday through Saturday, but we could obviously cut this and only do Friday and Saturday to cut the cost.
Okay.
And that's probably when you would see the biggest usage of that service. I think in terms of the number of vehicles that you would need, because of the distances to travel, it might be tough to reduce that total vehicle count too much. It's just not that many vehicles, but we could certainly reduce the days. Okay, so Castle Hills. So Castle Hills is planned to be annexed in December, I believe. And because they are going to be annexed, we would like to provide service to them. So this is very similar to this 121. Riders would be able to book from Castle Hills to First Park 121 or from Castle Hills to Louisville. And also if Business 121 was included, they would also be able to book between those 2 zones. So essentially people kind of from this area that are taking the service in this general southern half of the zone, they would be able to travel within any of the island zones of Louisville, Highland Village, First Park 121, the business shopping area 121, or Castle Hills. So this would also require an additional vehicle, and it would be about $200,000 per year. Okay, so the next add-on is weekday late night service hours. So we received some data on the green line for trying to assess how many rides you're seeing late at night. and determining whether or not it might make sense to extend service hours during Monday through Thursday. So instead of ending at 10 p.m., ending a little bit later. What we're seeing is that there's not much demand when you look at some of the busiest days of the week, right? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, especially Friday and Saturday that you would expect to be very busy and people going out. We don't see a ton of demand and people using the green line, which leads us to believe that there would not be much demand potential during in regular service during those hours. So our recommendation is not to proceed with this, certainly not as a phase one, and to consider it at a later phase. If we do consider it, post-pandemic, people behaviors change and people just want to go out as much as they can. Monday through Thursday becomes the next Friday. Then the price for that would be about 8 vehicles and $205 or $205,000. And last but not least, on the add-ons is access. It's a paratransit service. So this was one in all of our roundtable discussions. Everybody was really excited about paratransit and the possibility of both having a pretty big impact, both from a financial and economic standpoint, but also from a rider experience standpoint, and really giving riders increased transparency, quality of service on their rides. At the same time, we also identified that trying to combine access as part of phase one was probably going to be biting off more than we could chew. And so we came to the conclusion that we would probably want to include access as a phase two. So access, we expect to need about 8 to 10 additional vehicles for this service. And the one thing that we also have added here is that the cost per vehicle hour for these rides is a little bit higher. And the reason that it's a little bit higher is really just a higher support need for paratransit services. And so the year one cost, our estimate is about $600,000 to $1 million.
Question for you, Kaylee, is it really $1 million? Is it 620 for the what we call the cutaway vehicles?
No, so this is actually these 8 to 10 extra vehicles. This was basically all. Okay. This is actually still assuming the mixed fleet. I do think that we need to revise this number, so I can get back to you on what the revised number is.
But it should basically, you're telling us a range, 600 to $1 million. Gotcha.
Yes, we're telling you a range. I think one of the reasons that we've provided a range is just I think we would need to see a little bit more data to help refine that a little bit more, and we're happy to take a look at that. But with what we have seen, this is the range that we would be looking at.
Thank you.
And does staff have what it costs DCTA to provide this service now at the level that we're proposing, or that is proposed that VIA provide that level of service? What are we paying to provide this service right now? It doesn't have to be answered now, but that'll be one of the questions that just to be able to, because I don't know, I'm sure I've got it somewhere, but yeah, just be curious. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. We have not done the analysis over access. We have done the cost comparison over the services that are being proposed in kind of the phase one base service that we'll go over a little bit later in the presentation. But absolutely, before we would move forward with the access, we'll get that information together as well.
Thank you.
So I'll move next to, we've gone through now all of the, the base service and the potential add-ons that were discussed at each of the roundtables. We took a look at all of these add-ons, the reasons why they were requested, understanding, not just from the roundtables, but from the many months of really collaborative conversations that we have had with you, understanding your goals and objectives. And so we've put together what we think is a proposal that would meet those objectives, and I'll go through that now. So we propose to have a phased approach for launch, very similar to the way that you guys are thinking about this. We suggest to do things in phase 1 and phase 2A and B. And a lot of this is kind of dictated by the pandemic and how things evolve. So phase 1, the main objective is to really grow ridership and recover from the pandemic as quickly as possible. And the way that we believe that this can be done is by targeting either the areas or the times of day or the use cases that are going to be least impacted by the pandemic and most likely to see a significant ridership. So what we think those are is this base case, obviously, Sunday service, as there is no Sunday service today. Saturday late night, particularly in September, I think there's going to start seeing Saturday late nights pick up again, we hope. And business 121, I think across all of our services, we've seen a lot of ridership from shopping areas, especially, and people traveling to the places, the leisure daytime activities. Phase 2 is really going to be about starting to increase coverage and service efficiency. And so here, there's a couple of things. One of them is we're going to have phase 1 ridership data to understand exactly where we want to expand the service next. But our recommendation at this point would be Castle Hills, which the timing will probably work out because they're going to be annexed in December, and we're proposing to do this in January. And then the next here would be Access. Obviously, including a paratransit service is going to allow us to have a better efficiency on the usage of the vehicles as we can kind of assess when the vehicles are needed where at what times of the day. And then phase 2B. Phase 2B is really, it's let's think this is post-pandemic, definitely post-pandemic, and we're, hopefully far enough away from this where any major changes in travel patterns post-pandemic have been identified, and we'll be able to use that data to inform new additions to the service. So I've included here some add-ons that I think will be interesting post-pandemic, but might not be might not have garner enough ridership to be very cost effective while people are still kind of coming out of COVID. So those services are Trinity Mills service, the Sunday A train service, and obviously using some of the data that we'll have at that point, either community feedback or rider feedback through the app that we can track, we'll be able to identify additional zones potentially to expand to. And so what does this look like on a map? So this is phase 1, where we are suggesting to add this first park 121 and the lakeside area, this town crossing shopping area. We do think that those 2 zones are going to generate meaningful growth of the service and be cost effective to include as phase 1. And then Saturday extending to 11 p.m. and also including Sunday service. We think there will be a significant demand there that would warrant a service being in place for phase 1. Phase 2A. So phase 2A, the Denia neighborhood expansion. This is one that I didn't include, and kind of going over all of the different zones for expansion relative to the cost and relative to the potential for ridership that we saw. We just didn't see a ton of ridership potential or a meaningful population in that neighborhood to that we thought was going to be cost effective for DCTA. So our initial proposal is not to include Denia neighborhood, but obviously we're here to hear from you and hear your feedback, and you guys are the locals that have the intimate knowledge of these zones. So we're definitely excited to open it up for discussion very soon. The Castle Hills has been added as phase 2A, and Access which is a little bit hard to show on the map, but access has also been added to phase 2A. And obviously at any of these points, whether we say, okay, Castle Hills is the right zone or there's another zone, we will have data at this point to be able to analyze and look at and also help us, kind of combine the data that we have with community feedback in making these decisions. And then finally, phase 2B. These are the Trinity Mills and Frankfurt stations. I think the data that we saw from Trinity Mills just showed the significance of the impact that COVID has had on Trinity Mills ridership. And, I think that Trinity Mills, Sunday A train, Frankfurt station, these three struck me as add-ons where we might want to wait and see what travel patterns and behaviors are like after the pandemic in order to make a decision on whether or not we include them. And if we do include them, it would probably be after January when, nobody is working from home or where we have a very clear understanding of what the new remote working situation ends up being for people. And this is kind of just showing on a map the evolution of these three phases that we have proposed. And I think with that, we may want to, I guess I'll open it up for questions and I can go back and forth to any slide that you guys would like.
Right, because I know we've been at the presentation for an hour, so this is how I'd like to handle this, because we've got several different add-ons that you've gone through. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back through each one of these, and then we're going to be able to ask questions on them singularly. And I know some of them are tied together. In other words, if you do this one, then the cost for this one is that. So when we get to those, we'll deliberate on those sort of together. But I think we need to just go back to the presentation and start working through just them one at a time. And if it's a Denton one, people can ask questions about Denton. If it's Louisville or Highland Village. We've got the base ridership. I think what's the, I guess for me, I don't know what the first add-on is. I mean, I'm okay with the base. I'm okay with the base. Are there any questions about our base costs? I think we got some clarification on that based upon the original numbers. Are there any questions on the base cost before we go into the add-ons?
Chair Watts, I will add, I just sent the full board a copy of the presentation that VIA is presenting currently. So if anybody needs to look at that or refer to that individually, you should be able to do so in your email.
Sure, thank you. I did get that. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, so what was the first add-on then?
So first add-on, we have Sunday and holiday service. So again, Sunday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 10 holidays per year that would operate the same 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. schedule.
Mayor.
Okay, and is that tied with anything else, or is this sort of?
No.
Okay, go ahead, TJ.
Sorry, I did have a question on the base service.
Yes.
We're proposing running Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., correct?
Monday through Thursday, 6
Monday through
a.m. to 10
Thursday.
p.m. Friday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay. I may be mistaken. Does the A train run from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m.?
The A train, I believe, does have something earlier than 6 a.m. But the data that we saw just did not suggest that there was enough ridership to warrant extending the service hours to 5 a.m.
To 5 a.m.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so this was discussed in a few of the roundtables.
Yeah, and that, yeah, it does concern me that we've got a section there. If the service was, it's the whole classic. If the service was there, would more people use it, or does nobody use it because the service isn't reliable enough? I would like to explore that piece, and it kind of doubles onto another question I have about the rail. which is, if we're going to be extending it, the Trinity Mills option, I think it was, where people could just bypass the train again. These are two things that I think are actually weakening our rail, not strengthening it. So I'm not sure how we want to address that, if that's a phase 1 or a phase 2, but those are my concerns, is that we have two actions going on that are, in my opinion, looking like they're going to weaken ridership on the A train.
Oh, okay, so was there any analysis done of the cost for beginning the service at 5 a.m. on the base model or as an add-on? Was there any analysis on that, like a not to exceed cost?
No, there was no analysis done on a not to exceed cost. I can see if we can pretty quickly put something together, though.
Well, so maybe a different way to come at this would be to say, okay, let's run the train at 6 a.m. instead of 5. So it matches, right?
And we do have data on how many are getting on the train at 5 and how many are getting on the train at 6.
Yes, and we can share that data with VIA if they don't have it already. I can tell you that from previous conversations, the reason why we start rail service at 5 a.m. from the Downtown Denton Transit Center is to get individuals who might work in downtown Dallas in adequate time before their work schedule begins, because there are some earlier schedules.
Okay.
Do you know what that ridership is off the top of your head? At 5?
I do not off the top of my head.
Okay.
So if maybe we could get a little analysis on that and make that a priority for phase 2, since I think we need to, once we're done with this process, we need to pivot and really drill down on the rail.
Okay. Any other comments on the base price? Okay, we'll go to then, which was our first add-on, I think, which was Sunday service or Sunday service, or?
Yes, so
Holiday
Sunday and holiday service.
Okay. Any questions on this? Or comments of support or non-support? TJ, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I can't see everybody, so I don't know who's got their hand raised. So I saw TJ, but I thought I heard Cesar. Did you
Yeah,
have a question? Yes.
I'll go after TJ.
Okay.
You probably got the same questions I do, Cesar. It's okay. So I know I've been looking to see what we can do to get to 365 service. VIA has assumed 10 holidays. Pardon my ignorance. How many holidays do we observe for DCTA?
Sorry,
Nicole.
technical difficulties. I believe that it is 10, but I am confirming.
Thank you.
A new collection of data has been detected.
We currently do not operate service on 6 holidays.
So VIA is actually expanding our holidays from 6 to 10. Is that correct?
Correct. In the base service, model, we had assumed 10 holidays as kind of the standard bank and observed holidays. Nicole, are there any other, in addition to the 6, are there any other days that have a reduced service?
There are, with our contract through UNT, we do have days that have reduced service, but we do not reduce connect service in association with the holidays. We only have the 6 where we do not operate service.
Can I ask a clarification question of Kaylee, TJ? I don't want to take.
Absolutely.
When you, so what is Sunday plus holiday simply you are filling in the gap to take it to 365? You assume 10 holidays and no Sundays.
Exactly.
This would take you to 365.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Super, super. So as long as we're moving towards 365 and not expanding holidays, then I'm plenty bueno with that.
Any other questions or feedback or comments on this before we move on to the next add-on?
I'll add one more. Mine, and this one actually pertains to this one and the next one, which is your Saturday service.
Mhm.
If we don't have adequate ridership, what happens then?
When you say adequate ridership on,
Okay, so what I'm saying is, okay, we're going to spend, say the board agrees to add $380,000 for this, and it doesn't have that many people riding it.
Not gonna cost us that much.
exactly, it just wouldn't
Okay.
cost you that much. So
Okay.
so these are there are 15 vehicles that we will already have access to, right? Because we will have a fleet of 25 from the base.
Mhm.
And so we don't have to acquire new vehicles. We don't have to insure new vehicles. We're just going to be using them more. And so if let's say that there is only enough ridership to warrant 5 vehicles, then we will only put 5 vehicles on the road.
And the price would then be commensurately reduced. Okay,
Exactly.
gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
And I would also add that this is actually something we are doing very actively. So it's something that part of what we view as our responsibility in running the service is to match the sort of rider demand with the vehicle hours we put on the road. And so not even just on certain days of the week, but also even within the day, we're going to make sure as much as possible we're aligning the supply hour availability with the demand we're seeing in order to make sure we're maximizing efficiency for DCTA. And so that is an active part of what we're doing, which is part of why we call it sort of a not to exceed as well, because you're only going to get billed for the hours that you're actually seeing service on the road.
Thank you.
So, quick question, just to make sure I'm understanding. The 346 and the 380, are those not to exceed numbers, assuming a multiple vehicle fleet and then a single vehicle fleet, or a mixed fleet and then a totally managed by VF fleet?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So you guys are able to calculate this real time. In other words, you're able to make changes on demand based upon the demand fairly quickly. This isn't something you do, retrospectively saying, oh, well, our ridership isn't what it is, so we're only going to do. This is something that's dynamic, and you're able to make those adjustments fairly quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is a big part of what we do is we're actively trying at any given point in time to forecast and predict demand. And we have these models that do this for us, taking into account historical demand and upcoming events and things like that, and trying to forecast exactly what demand will be, and then make sure we're matching supply as closely as possible.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, the next add-on. And there'll be some point, I guess the add-on will be regarding the zones, because I do have a question about the Dina zone, but we'll get to that.
So here is Saturday service hours extension. So basically allowing people to use the service until 11 p.m. on Saturday night.
Okay. So question on these not to exceed. If the demand exceeds what's in the proposal, in other words, what y'all forecasted for the proposal, what happens then?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Chair Watson. I think so. There are a few things we can do. One is we have a variety of things we can do from a service parameter perspective to try to increase efficiency, right? And obviously, these are decisions we take in consultation with DCTA staff to make sure we're comfortable with the implications. But they're things we can do to increase the amount of sort of sharing that happens, which reduces the number of vehicles you need. That changes routing parameters, maybe to make the service favor sort of more sharing and more aggregation. And so there are a number of things we can do to try to sort of get more out of the amount of vehicle hours that's included in the not to exceed. And so that would be sort of choice one, and we make some of those decisions in consultation, obviously, with what DCTA and the community want. So there is a little bit of flexibility in increasing efficiency,
Sure.
changing parameters. And then, of course, if we see, for example, that a particular zone or particular time of day or something like that is seeing more than we expected by quite a lot, and we think it would exceed the not to exceed, we can obviously work with you all and work with DCTA to make service adjustments. So we can make service adjustments in both directions, right? So one zone sees less than we need, okay, maybe we curtail service there, and sort of grow the number of hours we're putting into another zone or time. So we are able to generally speaking, we're quite flexible in sort of our zones of how this can operate, and we want to work iteratively with the community and with DCTA to make sure we're sort of striking the right balance over time.
Sure. So it's just a matter of, hey, if the efficiencies don't work, then we come back and say, look, we're exceeding, the demand is exceeding what we forecasted, which is a good thing. So we need to figure out how do we make adjustments per our agreement to help accommodate that or find some solution. So, okay, just wanted to make sure that we have a process in place if that happens. I mean, that's a good problem to have, but we also want to make sure that we have a way to handle it in an efficient way.
Certainly. Yeah, we totally.
And I, hopefully this is not skipping ahead. Which of these add-ons have fixed costs that will incur even if there's no use? In other words, sounds like all of this is, most of these add-ons are, if you use it, you pay for it. If you don't use it, you don't pay for it. Are they, or any, or not of that's not true for of these add-ons?
Yeah, so our model in general is generally a highly variable cost sort of model, right? So you pay for hours you use. We have a slide a little bit later, which we can show, which talks about any upfront costs. They're very minor in general. So there's the bike racks add-on, for example, would have some fixed costs associated with it, but it's a relatively small amount to equip the fleet. As you saw, I think it's around $37,000. And then there's a very small amount of upfront costs associated with retrofitting some of the vehicles to be wheelchair accessible, which has a little bit of upfront cost associated with it, which is just an upfront cost to the project in general, not to any of the add-ons in particular, just to the base scenario. But it's a very small percentage of the contract. So in general, it's a highly variable cost model.
Great. All right, next add-on. Dina. I think there might have been some confusion about this particular zone or add-on. I know there was a lot of discussion in our roundtable about this because I thought, and my mind can forget what I talked about yesterday. So I certainly will state that right up front, because I know part of what we talked about is right now the zone stops at I-35, and that there's a lot of new development, and then there's and understanding that this part of the city was not serviced by fixed route service. So this truly is an add-on. So, and I know we talked a lot about the mobile home park, and then we talked about the neighborhood there that's sort of south of I-35. So was the discussion that the people who wanted to ride it could travel to the stop along 377 here, or help refresh my memory on that discussion?
Yeah, so that was exactly it. It's your memory is better than you give it credit for. It was the people that are in this new development area that are just to the northwest of this the gray black shaded zone.
Right.
So the decision there was that they are close enough to the Denton zone that they would be able to just book from the edge of the zone and be picked up and walk to the edge of the zone.
Okay.
And then it was, while we were on the call, we said, okay, well, so the new development just outside of the zone, they will be able to walk, but there are these mobile homes that are a little bit further away from the zone, and so we kind of took the time to draw on the map what that might look like for those that would not be able to walk to the zone.
Okay. Well, so what I would like to maybe take a look at, because I think you're recommending this as it's proposed, that this add-on occur in phase 2. Was that correct?
So I mean, I think the challenge with this zone is just the geography, basically, or the where the zone is. You would probably need to add an additional vehicle to your fleet to be able to pick up people that are on the edge of this what we're calling this DCTA expansion, and do that while maintaining the same wait times and quality of service for some of these other areas.
Yeah.
I think, again, this is one that it's a not to exceed amount. So, if we didn't see demand going, to or from this area, we just wouldn't send a vehicle out there and we wouldn't use that additional vehicle. But, looking at some population data of what we saw here, it just didn't seem like there was enough in this little pocket that would warrant such an additional cost.
See, and that's really, to me, and I basically I oppose this, quite frankly. I oppose this little hook because I don't think it's efficient enough. And so what I'd like to be able to see, is there a way that we can incorporate, because to walk over to the other zone, I mean, when you're talking about Willowwood Street, which really sort of defines a large part of that Denia neighborhood, I mean, that's a quarter to a half a mile to walk from the edge of that. So I would like to sort of see if there's a way that we can just sort of wrap this zone around and look at some geographical road that really does provide maybe the northern limit, which wouldn't be much, and see if that, number one, changes the add-on price if we with one vehicle, depending on demand. Because I don't know what the population is out there in those mobile home parks, and this is a pretty good stretch. Do we know what the distance is on this zone? It looks like it's what, a mile, half a mile, 2 miles? And how many stops would be along that corridor?
So I mean, I think in terms of the distance, it's about a mile, and the number of stops, basically we create a stop at every corner. We create virtual bus stops, and so basically this would mean that if we're able to pick someone up at a nearby corner, we would do that. Obviously, if they're because of this road and because of how easy or difficult it is to stop, we have to remove some of these virtual bus stops from our service. We would be able to do that. And we could certainly, as we're going through the planning process and implementation phase, if we realize that we need to, change this zone to include one more street, that wouldn't impact the cost in any way.
So let me just give you a parameter, and y'all don't need to do it today, but it'd be nice to see the analysis on it. I think if it had a zone that was bounded by Roselawn to the south, Bonnie Bray to the west, and then Roselawn would come off sort of about a quarter of a mile down from 35 on this little hook. So it would like sort of come around, curve around to Bonnie Bray, and then Bonnie Bray go on up to I-35. It would really fill in that. So if there's a way to just, in the next couple of days, kind of map that out and see what that does to the model as far as demand, that would be very helpful, because there's a lot more population density in the boundaries that I described than along this 377 corridor. I'm not saying we eliminate it necessarily, but what would it be to sort of fill that in with those, and that would encompass also all the new development areas where there's going to be 1,000 homes probably going up. Well, they're already turning dirt and laying infrastructure. So I think it would help me be able to make a better decision on this particular Denton add-on, because I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of just this one. because I think it really does miss an opportunity, because some of the houses there, that's an old Denia neighborhood, and some of those houses, I believe, are or that area, that neighborhood is conducive for people, I think, who would ride public transportation that is this convenient. So I certainly want to be able to at least know, is there an opportunity to provide that?
Sure. And I can certainly, I can take a look at those boundaries that you suggested, and really just try to see how you know, how much could we extend with this one vehicle, and how much of a population
Sure.
could we get within this area?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Of course.
So conceptually, I'm really okay with the Denia neighborhood expansion. It's just not necessarily in the configuration that's presented here without having the data and the information for that other component.
Certainly.
Yeah.
We will get that to you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next, again, we didn't provide a proposal for this 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. During the roundtable discussion, we had all kind of come to a verbal agreement that this was probably not going to be worth it, and we didn't. And we then afterwards have obviously taken a look at the data and proven that with some numbers. So any questions or feedback or concerns here?
Any questions? Don't hear any? Don't see any. Lindsay, are you
Okay.
seeing any hands raised?
There are no hands raised.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so business 121 North, and just to clarify again, so because this is an island service, takes some time to travel out here, we would require an additional vehicle. The benefit of this service is obviously we do think that this could generate a lot of demand with the shopping center and the lakeside complex that you have there, the apartment buildings. And then another benefit is that you would be able to include this First Park 121 employment center along the route.
Any questions on this zone?
Are there costs associated with this zone that aren't tied to use?
So Alex, do you want to take that? I think the extra vehicle, again, it's only if it's used. Is there the
Yeah,
additional
there's no fixed cost. So it would require us to bring an extra vehicle into the fleet, but again, you would not be you'd only be charged for hours used.
And
Okay.
actually, just one question to that, it's probably the bike rack. If the bike rack is added and the vehicle is retrofitted, then that would be 1,500 extra. So.
Okay, thank you. And so that's just true, y'all. When you add a vehicle, it's a cost you incur that you don't pass along to us unless the vehicle is used, correct?
That's correct, exactly. And typically we would do that, the way that works on our side is typically we would do that with some understanding that we're seeking to grow the service in some way, right? So we typically add to the fleet in a scenario like this where we agree, okay, we're going to add on and cover some additional area, or demand has gone way up and we think there's appetite and ability to put those additional hours on the road. So that's typically how we sort of absorb that on our side.
Okay, and that's a risk you take on your side.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So, and this probably bleeds into a couple of other ones, and maybe is more appropriate for one of the later ones, but we do have residential down on Josie and 544, and that's not covered in any of the add-ons.
Let me just take a look at a map quickly just to make sure that I'm.
And also to give everybody a heads up, we'll be taking probably about a 5 or 10 minute break here in a few minutes. So we've been going for about an hour and a half.
TJ, where exactly are you referring to?
Josie and 544.
TJ, I do apologize. I think I'm just missing where that might be. I'm looking at a map right now trying to locate that relative to this Forest Park 121. Is it east, west,
South.
south? Okay.
If you look at that map you're on, Kaylee, look at where you see Hebron,
Uh-huh.
south of that.
544 is also called Parker Road.
Parker
Kayla, that
Road,
might help
yeah.
you.
Okay.
So see where this little jog is? Oh, I can't point. The two thickest white lines south
A
of
new
the
collection of data
121.
has been detected.
So that white line, right there, go to your left and right. That is 544 /
There
Parker.
it is. That's
Okay.
it.
Now keep going right. Keep going right. Keep going right. Keep going right. Keep going right to the next intersection. Oh, you just lost.
Sorry, I had to move the
So the
gallery
next
view.
that intersection to your right
That's-
there.
that's
that is
Josie.
Parker and Josie. There are
Okay.
two neighborhoods on the left side of Josie going up to that Greenbelt Creek that are Louisville.
Over here.
Yep.
Okay. So this I do not believe that when we first were on the round table that we actually drew this zone on the map. What we can do is we can kind of take a look at the potential population in this area and see whether or not we would be able to include this in the zone or whether it would be some additional costs.
That would be great.
Any other questions on this particular add-on? Okay. Move on to the next one. Any questions on these? Seems pretty straightforward and self-explanatory.
Yeah.
I think that's a good suggestion. You know, for the cost, I think that's, yeah, I appreciate that. All right, we can move on to the next one. Oh,
Chair
go ahead.
Wolf, I did see, I'm not seeing hands raised, but I am seeing people unmute. So I didn't know if board member Connie White had a comment.
Okay.
Just want to double check.
All right. Any comments?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure, I'm having trouble figuring out how to do the hand raise. But anyway, I appreciate that. I had some questions, more generic questions. Is this a time to ask that?
Generic, just in a sense of sort of general about the whole proposal?
Yes, they're not a specific add-on, but a question about the whole thing.
How many more add-ons do we have?
So we have Frankfurt and then Sunday, Trinity Mills, Castle Zone, weekday.
Okay. I tell you what, Connie, go ahead and ask them. And then after your questions, we'll go ahead and take a quick break.
Okay, thank you.
bet.
One of my questions is, how are we going to staff these? Are they employees, contractors, and are they bonded? I have more questions, but I'll throw those out there first.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. So the actual drivers or operators of the vehicles would be contractors that would be sort of we VIA would be working with. So we have in general used a contractor model for our driver operators in basically all of our microtransit services. Happy to talk a little bit more if it would be helpful about why that is, but we generally think it's a preferable model from sort of a cost effectiveness and flexibility perspective. But also happy to talk through that further if it would be helpful.
Okay, and I mean, that would mean, if I understand correctly, there's no benefits involved or anything like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. We are committed to making sure that all of our drivers earn sort of a living wage, and that is a check that we do every time we set rates and continue to check throughout the time we're operating the service. And that is something we check after the costs that are associated with sort of operating the vehicle and all that the driver would incur. So we're committed to sort of net of their sort of costs for doing their jobs. We ensure that all the driver operators are earning a living wage. They would not get benefits from us as part of the service.
Okay, and are they, I know like in the general demand service, you know, there's always that question of safety. Are your drivers certified, bonded? How do we ensure that safety aspect?
Definitely. No, it's a great question. So I'll talk through a couple of pieces. One is we will do background checks as part of the vetting and registration process. All drivers will be background checked and drug test in advance of becoming operators. So that's something we will do in advance. And we will agree upon those background check standards with DCTA to make sure we're fully aligned on what the standards are for those background checks. Additionally, all drivers will undergo training in advance of actually becoming operators, which includes both training on sort of how to drive on the system, how to use the technology, safety, and what safety means for us. We can sort of happy to talk more about some of the details of exactly what goes into that safety training and how important it is to us. But each and every driver would go through that training in advance. We then have a number of things we're doing to monitor the service and monitor individual drivers' performance and safety standards. This includes, we recently started a program to use some more advanced technology as well, cameras inside the vehicles that help us monitor driver behavior, things like distracted driving as well. So that's another new tool that allows us to monitor sort of individual level performance and safety.
Thank you. I also noticed when you showed the example of how you request the service and you mentioned that the person at the end could rate the service. Is that also going to now pop up with the tipping thing like it does on some of the other apps?
No, typically we would not set up tipping for a public transit service like this. So it's not, we have the ability to do so in the technology if there was a desire to do so, but generally speaking in public transit services, we do not enable that tipping option, given it's not customary in public transit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, to be sure. And I think the final thing I have is, the data that you provide to us, will that measure wait times?
Yes.
You know? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. I tell you what, it is 11:33. Let's take a break and come back at 11:45. And I guess we'll move through lunch, and if you need to take a break and grab you something to eat, we just need to make sure that we maintain a quorum. So if you're able to do it right now, that's wonderful. If not, we'll just make sure that we get it done. So let's come back at 11:45. Okay, as we come back, we'll get started. And I will probably be off camera some because I will be eating my lunch, and I know that you all do not necessarily want to see that.
Chair Watts, before we hop it back into this,
Yes.
because this meeting was scheduled till noon, it's about quarter till, I think there may have been at least one individual that may have to leave early. I'm not sure of what board member
That would be
schedules are
me.
for today, so I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that
Okay.
would be me, Christina.
Okay.
I was gonna say that, yeah, I'll probably need to hop out around noon.
Okay.
But as
All
long
right.
as no one else is departing, then we would still have a quorum for the action items.
Cesar, before you drop off, do you want to give some of your thoughts or a direction, or you just want to wait?
Let me, mainly I'm supportive of what so far I've heard. I just want to make sure, and I think I did ask the question. If
Well,
we don't
yeah,
get,
if I tell you what, let's do that in open session. So
Okay.
we're gonna start back up, and I'll just ask you the same question because I want to make sure that.
let's do that.
Yeah. Let me. Do we have a quorum yet?
I believe we do, yes. It looks like we have, from what I can see, just
See
one
myself,
second.
Cesar, Sam.
And yes, TJ is here. Yes, we do have all board members are back. And then I believe we're still waiting on Mayor Wilcox to return on behalf of Diane, but we do have a quorum.
Yeah, let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and get started so we can hear Cesar's comments before he has to sign off.
Okay.
Well, I'll go ahead and we'll reconvene this meeting of the Denton County Transportation Authority at 11:48 a.m. We're talking about VIA's proposal, and so we'll open it up for discussion. Vice Chair Molina. Yeah, I think you'd mentioned you needed to leave at 12, so just wanted to give you an opportunity to share some comments and any direction you have. If you don't, that's fine, and we'll certainly get that at a later time.
Okay, thank you, Chair Watts. I'm basically supportive of what I've heard so far. My concern about if the demand is not there was addressed when they said, we won't be charged for what we don't use. I like us to move more towards as long as it's cost effective to provide as much service as possible for the area. And I think a lot of I'm not sure if we're going to get a lot of service as far as maybe going to retail. I kind of think that the greatest thing we offer is about providing service so employees can get to employers, and I think that's really important. So those are my thoughts. Thank you for allowing me to share that, Chair Watts.
You bet. Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
And I was going to say it again, I need to sign off around noon to attend another meeting. If that meeting ends early, I will sign back on if that's all right with everyone.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Okay, so I think we'd left off with Board Member White's questions on just general questions of benefits and safety. So I guess to follow up with her question, does VIA do, okay, so you do the background checks when you first initiate the contract with contractors and drug testing. Is there periodic checks of these people throughout their contract employment with VIA?
I'm happy to take that one, Chair Watts. So typically we would initiate the background check upon the initial moment of sort of engagement with us as a driver operator. We have the ability to also set up a recurring check. So if that's something that's of interest to DCTA, that is definitely something we could set up.
Does that also pertain to drug testing as well?
Yes, not quite. So the answer is slightly different for drug testing, which is that drug testing, we will we will do, there's sort of a typical protocol we would follow that's consistent with FDA guidelines around random drug testing as well. And so the answer there is that there's a much higher chance that that would happen periodically. It depends a little bit on if you're selected and or if you have some sort of accident or incident. There's also a post-accident drug testing protocol. And so in those cases for drug testing, it's more likely you would be tested on an ongoing basis. For background checks, typically we'll do that just up front.
Sure.
By standard, but can, as mentioned, can implement a recurring check if that's something that's of interest.
No problem. And this goes without saying, but obviously, we'll rely upon our legal counsel as far as on contracts for indemnity and things such as that, or just, as we discuss this. So, yeah, okay. Well, we'll move on then through to the, we'll move back to the add-ons. So unless there's other questions.
Okay. So the next add-on is Frankfurt Station DART. And just for reference, this is option 1 and option 2 on the next slide. And the only difference between these two options are the hours in which riders would be able to book to and from the Frankfurt DART station. So option 1 is 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. And option 2 follows the normal weekday service hours, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Any questions?
More of a statement. This is the other one that concerns me because, again, it's encouraging people not to ride DCTA's A train, in my opinion. So what was the thought process on this one again, just so I can have a little bit more background?
Certainly. So the discussions in the Louisville roundtable, basically that the Frankfurt DART station has a significantly higher frequency than the first station or any of the stations that are within the Louisville zone, and so it was primarily to be able to give people access to a higher frequency stop.
And if I could add, Kyla, as part of that roundtable discussion, it was also to address those who were trying to get to their work within the Highland Village Louisville zone. And I believe that the conversation related to concern that the A train didn't have adequate frequency in order to meet their needs. And so those individuals were not utilizing the A train to get to work, and that this might give them an opportunity and give us an opportunity to have additional riders if we gave them this opportunity for a mode of transportation.
So I'm not against this. What I need though is for next step to be referencing how do we get our headways to match up better? How do we encourage ridership on the A train and eventually phase this out? Does that make sense?
Can you repeat that?
So I want to be able to encourage people to get on the A train. This does not encourage getting people on the A train. This encourages people, again, to stop at Frankfurt. If that impacts our businesses and people getting to work, I'm okay with this as a stopgap. But eventually, we've got to have an A train that is serviceable to A train stops, not to DART stops. And I don't know what the headways are. I know DART, what, is now at 15-minute headways?
Or a part of the day, yes.
Yeah, during peak hours, that's correct, which includes the business travel hours.
Yep. And I know that I've been told we can't get below, what, 21-minute headways without double tracking?
Correct. It actually went up a bit with PTC, but you're accurate.
So if this is what we have to do to be able to service folks, okay. But I'd like to be able to figure out how we get to those 15-minute headways on the A train so that this is a non-needed issue.
I'm with you. And I'm sorry, I for some reason thought this was something that the city of Louisville was requesting to have
Yep.
access.
And we did talk about it. And you know, as we kind of kicked that around and looked at it, I think I'm not, the reason I'm not against this is because I think it does fill a service hole.
Correct, yes.
But there is a service hole that I think the longer term strategy of the board needs to be, how do we figure out how to get that rail to be more integrated instead of less?
Correct, yes, agreed.
So that I understand, I don't know if the problem is the correct word, but what this is saying is it's only providing a ride between the two stations that are already in this zone, which is the three, the Frankfurt Dart station, which is, I think, what, at the southernmost part? I mean,
or
where's
the northernmost part, depending on which entity you're talking about.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, this is just providing within this blue zone here, the stops that DCTA has within this blue zone. Is that correct? Like if I'm going, it says here, addition of rides can be booked between the Frankfurt station in Louisville. So the Frankfurt station is where?
Frankfurt station is on the southernmost part of the corridor, and the Frankfurt station is further north than the Trinity Mills station where the A train serves. The A train
Okay, gotcha.
bypasses the Frankfurt station and does not have a connection point there.
Okay.
And it's
Okay.
because
We do
there's
not
a
serve
grade
the Frankfurt
separation. Sorry, Christina, there's a grade separation at Frankfurt. So there was a decision made way back when that the A train would not be at the same height or platform level. So it goes all the way down to Trinity Mills. During the conversations with Louisville, there was, it was brought to VIA's attention that there was some business parks that are on the southwest portion of this zone that didn't have easy access. So the closest access station, in some cases, depending on where a traveler is actually trying to get to their office, was either Trinity Mills or the Frankfurt station. And of course, Hebron is also an option depending on where in that southwestern portion of this zone people work. If that's correct, I'll give that back to VIA, but that was my recollection of the roundtable discussion that we had. We were trying to serve patrons that needed to get to work.
Okay. And I agree that, I mean, the underlying point of this is that it serves residents, and it's good for our ridership and our residents. It's not great for A train seats.
Right.
And that's where I just want to put a flag in this, because I think we need to circle back to it at some point.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to fight against ourselves.
Right.
Okay. Fantastic. And this is a not to exceed number as well. So if the demand's not there, it's not going to cost us that, and then we can revisit it if we need to do something different before a certain time frame.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on this or comments? All right. Let's move on to the next one.
I guess Chair Watts, are there any comments, because there are two options on the hours?
Okay. Gotcha.
It might be good to discuss, what are people's thoughts on, 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. or 6 to 10 and 6 to 11 to follow kind of in line with regular service hours?
I'm going to defer to Board Member Gilmore. He's representing the Louisville area. And of course, I'm not saying I'm not deferring to anybody else, but I really don't have an opinion based upon the needs in that area. So I'm going to rely upon comments from other board members who have a little bit more clear understanding of that.
What is refresh? We're a lot of moving parts. My apologies. What are the service hours for VIA and not the rail?
So for VIA, I'm unmuted. Yeah. So for VIA, it is Monday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Friday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And those are the weekday service hours. So the idea with option 2 is obviously that if the demand is there, then great, let's serve it through all of the service hours. If the demand is only there during the commuting times, then we would obviously only use the vehicle during those times. This is why, you know, we have these two options.
My take is let's do service option 2. We're going to do a massive education process, and the more variability that we have in service times, the more confusion that creates for the market. So I would lean towards this option 2.
Perfect.
Let me add something. It seems like you could have boiled this down to just one option and say we're going to do the whole thing, and if it turns out we don't need it, we don't pay as much. So I think if you do 2, option 1 is still there. If it turns out there's no need, there's no demand after 6:30, you just don't.
Yeah,
use it.
I'd rather dial it back than dial it up.
Yeah.
And Chair Watts, we in Highland Village agree with that as well, since it's since the service is there. So.
Okay. All right. So do I hear option 2 is sort of the consensus?
Yes.
I think so.
Option
Okay.
2.
All right. Okay. Thank you all for that.
Okay, great. So moving on to phase 2. First up, we have the Sunday A train replacement. Obviously, there is no Sunday A train service. So this would be providing riders an opportunity to travel between the 2 blue zones or go all the way down to the Trinity Mill station. The only thing that they wouldn't be able to do is
Stepping out for a second, guys. Just letting you know. Stepping out.
Okay. All right,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vice Chair.
So just to pick up, so the only thing that they wouldn't be able to do is, you know, for example, travel between Louisville to Lake Dallas or to anywhere that is not one of the DCTA zones here.
Okay, any questions? I have a question, but wanted to see if there's any other board members who have a question about this. So my question is, when it says the drop off anywhere within the blue zone. So let's say I'm at the whatever this station is down here in Frankfurt, and I want to use this service. And so I'm coming back to Denton, and I want to be dropped off as close to my house as possible. Is that an option, or are there predetermined drop-off points for this service that then the customer has to make a provision to get from the drop-off point to their final destination? Or is this sort of like the regular service we're providing? That is, we're going to drop you off at a point that is a virtual stop at a corner or something like that.
Exactly. So it would be a virtual bus stop. So from the rider's perspective, they would say, I am at Trinity Mills and I want to go to my house in Denton. Okay. And they would put their home address in there. And then we would be able to guide them to a virtual bus stop that is at a nearby corner.
Okay, wonderful. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, and so this isn't just to Trinity Mills, it's in between these 2 zones, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great data point to gather, regardless of the A-train replacement. How many people, at least on this one day, want to get in between zones? Thank you.
All right. So, and again, this is a not to exceed, so that will be adjusted accordingly if demand's not there.
Correct.
All right, let's move on to this one.
Sure. Do you want to take a second to look at the data, or do you want me to just go to the next slide that talks about cost?
What's the board's pleasure? Y'all want to go over this data? We sort of went over it briefly.
I'm good with skipping ahead.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So this is service to from Trinity Mill Station as basically a safe ride at the end of the night. So we're basically adding on 3 hours of service each night. And during these 3 hours, this is not regular service. This is like a late night safe ride service only. So you would be able to be picked up at Trinity Mills and taken to, the virtual bus stop close to your home, basically.
I really think, so these hours would go from what to what? What's the maximum, what's the latest time?
So Monday through Thursday, service ends at 10 p.m. So it would be 10 p.m. until 1 a.m. And then Friday, it would be 11 p.m. until 2 a.m. And then Saturday, this is basically tacking on 3 service hours. So if you decided to add on the Saturday late night extension, taking your service hours till 11 p.m., then this would run from 11 p.m. until 2 a.m.
Well, I will say this could be possibly, as crazy as it sounds, one of the biggest game changers in this particular proposal, only because, and I'm sure everybody has heard stories from their friends and people who, get down to Dallas and they drive down to the Trinity Mills station to go into Dallas for late nights on games or things such as that because they can't get back. This really, and so somebody correct me if I'm wrong, this seems to eliminate that particular problem. So if you're coming back from a Maverick game and it gets out at 12 o'clock at night, you can use this service to get back to Denton to a virtual bus stop that is close to your final destination. Am I seeing that correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay. And for the cost to at least try it, yeah, I think this is going to be, and I think I'm with Board Member Gilmore. This, all of these add-ons, all of these things, there's going to be such a public rollout. It's going to be so critical that we really communicate these things and educate, because I think people are going to get excited about some of these new options. All right, any questions or comments on this one? All right, we'll move on to the next.
Okay, the next is
I'm sorry,
Castle
but
Hills.
before you move on to the next, my apologies, I was a little late on the unmute.
Sure.
Is this a phase? This was proposed as a phase 2, but it sounds like, do we want to reconsider it as having these as part of phase 1?
That's a good question. I appreciate that comment.
I'm kind of wanting to see what the total cost is for all of this, hear about what the financial impact would be all in, because if it's a use it, pay for it, and if you don't use it, you don't pay for it. I would tend to think we ought to be aggressive if we financially can be.
That's a good comment. Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is, let's get through these, then they're going to put up a menu, they're going to put the base price up, then they're going to put up the menu of add-on options, see what the all-in cost is on either all of them, or the access one seems to be the most expensive and seems to be the most variable, that I don't think that I could probably support in phase 1 just because I don't have the data. But yeah, what is it all going to cost? And if it is a not to exceed, then I tend to agree. Let's see how aggressive we can be, because I think to get the community's attention on these changes, which are substantial, I think we need to make sure that we're offering them some services that they may not have even thought that would ever be offered. So I agree with you, Sam. I think that's going to be a good discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think the staff has attempted to provide us with information, but I just want to see all in, what is the potential cost? What's the cost savings for what we're not doing? What's the overall revenue impact? And if we can afford it, I don't know why we don't go, because of what Chris Watts and TJ have said. You don't need to, if we're going to do it, let's just do it, and let's announce it, and let's just get real aggressive and make the change. And start gathering the data, because the the longer we have these services in place, I understand we're still in COVID protocols and that's going to affect usage. But if VIA is taking that risk, I'm okay with them taking it, you know? And they seem to be smiling about it. So let's let them do it. And anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Good comments.
Chair Watts, Board Member
Yes.
Connie White has her hand raised.
Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. One thought I had about that being aggressive, I mean, I basically agree with that, but I think that we also need to be cautious that we can manage so that we do it right, so that VIA can handle the ramp up and it's done in a fashion that we don't go out there with too much and not do it right. Just a thought.
Sure. And I appreciate that. I'm sure they'll weigh in as we go through these discussions about, you know, what we want to include. And of course, they've done a lot of the data analysis. So yeah, I appreciate that, those comments.
Yeah, and just to add on maybe one quick item there from VIA's perspective, I think that's one of the reasons we included the access service as a phase 2. I think it seems like from the roundtable discussions, there was quite a bit of excitement about that, and we're certainly think it's quite a good idea. But that's one that I think from a ramp up and as well as sort of public communication perspective has a bit more complexity associated with it. And so that was part of our thinking of including that as a phase 2.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on this, or we'll go to the next add-on?
Okay. So next add-on is Castle Hills, and I believe this is our second to last add-on. So Castle Hills, this is going to be annexed, and we have included the entire zone boundary of Castle Hills. You know, if this business park 121 wasn't included and Castle Hills was included, you would still get this first park portion with it. So again, this is you can book from Castle Hills to basically any zone except for Denton.
Is there a reason we didn't get or capture all of Castle Hills in this phase?
So I was under the impression that this was following the boundary of Castle Hills, so that was our intention. But it sounds like maybe that was not achieved.
So yeah, as we look at this, it's this area. Y'all will have to. I would highly encourage, if you haven't already, get with our city GIS staff, because this area is a hot mess, and you're not going to find the boundaries accurately portrayed on anything public. You're gonna have to deep dig. You can't just use a Google map to figure it out. So you've definitely missed a couple of high growth areas for Castle Hills that are mixed retail and residential. And then there's a chunk of residential down below that is missed. But if the intent is to cover all of Castle Hills, yay.
It's so without seeing the full size of the zone, I can't guarantee that. But if we're talking about you know, a few streets, I'm sure that would be within the one extra vehicle.
Okay, then yeah, I think it's probably closer to the few streets. Maybe let me see if I've got I had a drawing here. Claire was kind enough to send it to me. Let's see. So pretty much the yellow area, the boundaries you've missed for Castle Hills is the chunk between these two gray areas on this screen. So if you could just kind of draw a line between those, that covers most of it.
Okay.
And then if you took the 121 piece that you guys had earlier and filled that triangle in between it and the gray, with that southernmost boundary being that Parker Road 544, that's a close approximation of what we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would definitely fall within the one extra vehicle that we've quoted here.
Okay. So, but yeah, reach out to Claire. I think she has a better understanding of this. And if you don't have her contact information, let me know.
I'm about to hit send on the email. So VIA, we will get that contact person for you.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments on Castle Hills?
So is the expectation that this, so let's take it back. Castle Hills doesn't come on board until December-ish. The numbers that we have as far as what we think it's going to generate for tax revenue is in the $500,000 to $700,000 range. So I would want to see if we don't initiate this now, that we look to do that, turn on the Castle Hills component of it in that January timeframe. But you know, if we can do it now, I don't know if we can or can't. I mean, we're providing service technically to an area that does not pay into DCTA and is not one of the member cities. So
yeah, for me, this has nothing to do with it being Louisville or Castle Hills or anything. I think we've worked hard to really limit our services to areas outside of the member cities and just our geographical area. And if we have, we've certainly done it per contract, and we've added administrative costs. So, you know, I would just assume wait until it gets closer to being on board to see exactly how it's going to. So, I mean, I'm not going to oppose it, but those are sort of my comments.
yeah, no, and I feel like that's definitely speaking to setting a precedent that I don't feel is comfortable to set. But I do think if we could maybe begin the Title VI analysis, so that we could have this ready to go as soon as possible, I think that would be an outstanding next step.
No, and I can get on board with that, because you're just being efficient. You're not waiting till some magical date to begin the analysis. If we know we're going to do it, and we can do that analysis ahead of time so that we don't have to wait on it, I certainly understand that.
Okay.
PJ, is there any risk they're not going to get annexed?
It's negligible.
Okay. Well, I mean, and that.
But until the ink is dry and the lawyers have decided they don't want to do anything, you know, Sam.
No, I don't. That's why I'm asking you.
So right now, the city feels very, very comfortable, but until it's done, it's not done.
Okay. Well, if you think there's a risk, then I'm okay with not doing it. If there's really not a risk, then as we've talked about, one rollout's easier than two.
Yeah, talk to me after the Texas State Legislature is done with this session, and then I'll feel like there's less variables out there.
Yeah, well, I assume it's a voluntary annexation, right?
So it's a contract, actually. It's there was a SPA agreement. So yes, the entity that controls it, but they have created some interesting legal twists down in Austin that we're watching.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a contingency. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So we have two more to go through. One of them is weekday late night service hours. And this is, again, just extending 3 hours of service each night, basically the exact same type of service. So allowing you to go until 1 a.m. Denton to Denton, or Louisville, Highland Village. And our recommendation is certainly not to do this as a phase one as part of launch. And it could be something that is interesting, you know, as the pandemic is, you know, a year behind us, and you know, behaviors have really changed.
Okay. So you're saying this would be a phase two potential?
Phase two, you know, and I'll go through. We'll jump in a couple slides to just the list of all of the add-ons, because I think that'll be easy for everyone to kind of see the total. But phase two, kind of B. So after Castle Hills.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then this last one is paratransit, this access. So again, 8 to 10 extra vehicles, and this is where we have a variable cost that we have to provide right now, just because of, you know, I think we need a little bit more information in order to narrow down that range.
Okay.
Do we Do we know the current spending on access services by DCTA?
Yes, sure. Let me pull it up real quick. We have budgeted for access, specifically not zone service, but other access, roughly, and I wrote it down on my slide. 700,000, I want to say.
Okay.
Okay.
Bear with me just 1 second and I will pull it up.
So that was the figure I was asking for earlier.
I have since calculated.
Okay.
For both Denton and Louisville access, 158,000 is what we have included in the FY21 budget.
Say that one more time. Did you say 158,000?
758.
7,858. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I heard a 1. I didn't hear a 7. I'm like, wait a minute, there's 600,000 that just went away. What happened?
758, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so right now, this wouldn't be a cost savings.
I would just add that on the VIA side, I think this is one we've had a little less data on, so I don't think our as you can see through the range here, I think we probably have to dig in a little bit more to provide sort of an exact estimate. So it's just a piece of context.
Okay. And what would be the benefits to adding this via VIA as opposed to continuing to running it under DCTA? And I'm sure you've never had somebody do that as far as your name goes.
So I think, yeah, happy to defer to DCTA staff if you wanted to jump in here first, but if not, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think there's tremendous continuity and accessibility that you gain from having a consistent service. Access service tends to be more challenging as far as booking a trip. With the app, it makes it seamless. To me, it brings or affords more parity in the type of service that they're allowed in comparison to having a separate service. So there's a lot of benefits intangible that you don't get from the cost perspective. I would argue, even if it costs a little bit more through VIA, the integration, the simplicity for people to book trips is a vast increase in improvement over how access is typically provided through paratransit and access service across the country. I think this is one of the major benefits. Breaks down a lot of barriers. I'll hand it over to you, Alex. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. No. I think that's a great summary, Raymond. And only thing I might add is that I think in general what we've seen is that bringing sort of consistent branding and marketing as well as introducing a rider app, I think to paratransit is something that we've seen sort of very well received in other communities where we've managed paratransit and these types of services. And so I think from a rider experience and satisfaction perspective, that's been a huge upgrade. We also bring a number of other things that I think are sort of helpful that leverage our technology, like improved and automated communications to riders and other things like that. So I think there are a number of things around rider experience that we think would be beneficial.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree, Raymond, with your comments that sometimes, to pay a little extra, you do get those added sort of values that are both financial but also non-financial that really do provide a benefit. So this is going to sound like a silly question, but in the picture here, all right, that we have on the access, it shows, I'm presuming that it's a driver helping one of the clients. Or maybe it's past. So that's my question, both with DCTA and or VIA, because these are people that have additional needs. Do the drivers provide any type of egress assistance, or that's my question. I mean, do we do that now, or is it just left up to the driver's sort of own choice?
We do provide additional assistance. There are some limitations. For example, like the weight of the bags that the individual is carrying and how much we're willing to assist in order
Okay.
to safeguard our operators. But we do provide that additional assistance.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. I just didn't know, and I was just curious. All right. Any other questions on this?
So from the VIA perspective, does the driver assist passengers in that way for this type of service? Just to confirm.
Yes, definitely. We would provide the drivers who would be serving this particular service, which may end up being a large portion or a significant subset if we were to integrate the two services together of the broader microtransit service. They would all get actually additional special training for the access service that would go above and beyond what a driver would get typically for microtransit, and that would include training on exactly how to assist customers and what the expectations are for that.
Okay.
Alex, let me ask one more question if I may. This is Raymond. Typically, access service is more of a curb to curb or what's also considered door to door. Whereas the conventional service that VIA provides is to a virtual stop. Can you explain to the board members how this differs? Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. So in this case, the service we would be able to designate for any riders who are access services whenever they go to book a trip, whether that's calling into the call center or booking it through the app, they would be designated as access riders. They would be provided the specific curb to curb or door to door service that they're used to in the current service, while the regular general public sort of ridership would get the corner to corner service. And so we're able to differentiate specific users in that way and designate someone as being eligible for a particular type of service.
Okay. All right, let's, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to, what are we moving on to?
Chris, would it be helpful if if we moved on to
That right there.
this one right here? So this is single fleet cost going over all of them.
All right, so this has our base service, then this has our different add-ons. I think this is, Sam, I think this is what you were talking about. So yeah, so what we're looking at are all these different add-ons. So I know that the Denia zone, we were going to get some more data about that. Of course, that says 129, so we're going to see about wrapping that around, but that's probably not going to stop any direction here. There were some others. Which ones? The option 2 is the one that it sounded like there was a consensus on the Frankfurt station, Dart to Louisville. So what is the, let's do this. Incremental upfront cost one time. What are these on the right-hand side?
Yeah, so that is similar to what we mentioned earlier. There are sort of only a couple of things that are upfront costs that are non-variable. One is the bike racks that you see on the add-on option of 37,000. The other is just for the base service. There's some upfront costs associated with retrofitting vehicles. So specifically for a service like this, we would retrofit some portion of the fleet to be wheelchair accessible. We'd also wrap and brand the vehicles with DCA specific wraps. So that is the 128,000 of sort of upfront.
Okay. Do you have a slide that sort of subcalculates? I guess we'll have to maybe do this by hand, but like what I want to do is like in phase 1, we've got these costs associated before we get down to the phase 2 add-ons. Now this option 1 of 123 is not included because we chose option 2. So I'm trying to see what is the total cost if we said base service plus those things that are in phase 1 add-ons, obviously without the option 1 on Frankfurt. And there wasn't, I don't know if we had any kind of consensus on the Highland Village hours extensions. If so, we need to put a cost in there, but take out the 123, 180. And what are those costs for phase 1? If the board decided we're going to do exactly what's here, do we know what that number is?
My rough math looks like about $5.3 million.
Okay. All right.
But somebody please double check.
And while somebody's calculating that, just to confirm with VIA, we did send the presentation that you sent us this morning to the board, and I believe these numbers might be different. So board, if you could just let us check that. We may end up sending you a different presentation.
Okay. So the numbers that I'm looking at right now from VIA, are these your numbers for today?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the other numbers there's another slide that is the mixed fleet option.
Yeah,
So that looks very similar. But these are the numbers for the single fleet option.
Yeah, and I think we
You are
sort of,
spot on.
yeah, I think we nixed the mixed fleet option. So because it sounded like, based on what Nicole said, that by the time you added things back in, it was basically almost the same cost. There might have been a slight incremental cost, and I think that's where I think Raymond's comments are spot on, and that is, to have a mixed fleet to save $100,000 or $200,000, that could be more confusing and in the long run cost more money. But that's just my thought. Of course, I would entertain any other observations about that, but I didn't hear a whole lot of appetite for the mixed fleet. But if we want to see the numbers, then we can certainly do that.
And just FYI, that my calculation was not with the access, it was without.
But were you including the phase 2 add-ons as well?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I was trying to see what is it without the phase 2, but you're saying it was 5.3 million with the phase 2, but without the access.
Correct.
Okay.
So I have calculated the base service and then have included all phase 1 add-ons, but removed Frankfurt Station option 1.
Yes.
And that gets us to $4.8 million. That does
Okay.
not include any of the phase 2 add-ons.
Okay. And that's where the difference is with Sam, which is about $500,000 or $600,000, which is what those add up to. You got 4 or 5, got about $600,000. So
And I think based on discussion, it sounded like there was interest in adding the Sunday A train replacement. And if we were to add the Sunday A train replacement, the total cost would be $4,885,494. And again, these are just for service hour costs. They do not include any of those upfront costs.
Yeah, well, the upfront cost was basically 160,000, 128 plus 37, 165. So,
correct.
Okay, so go ahead.
Oh, it sounds like Castle Hills, everybody kind of agrees we want to wait on that, but it sounded also like the late night service hours extension, everybody was interested in.
Yep.
Which is the very next to last add-on.
I believe that based on VIA's presentation that they were recommending the late night service hour extension, the additional 3 hours per night, that they were recommending that in a future phase due to COVID. Is that correct, Kyla?
Correct. That is the Monday through Thursday extension of the service hours.
But that was the one that extended all the way to Trinity Mills, correct?
No, that is the Trinity Mills, that Trinity, right below the Sunday A train replacement, that Trinity Mills.
The late night service hours extension would increase the zone hours by 3 hours per day.
Yeah.
Right. And the board had, the interest in the Trinity Mills portion, which is the 112,000.
But that included late night hours?
The extra 3 hours post A train service.
Okay, I was confused on that.
So let's do this. Let's do this so we can get a little structure here. On phase 1 add-ons, we've taken out option 1 of the 123, 180. We've added it all up, and could somebody go ahead and calculate the total all in for phase 1 add-ons, including the one-time costs? The first year, so you said it'd be what, 4.8 million, 4 point what now?
So with, so
The
phase,
one-time-
that's
Sorry,
Go
Nicole.
ahead.
that's okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Marissa, where you can add something.
With the one-time upfront costs, the year one, phase one costs would be 4.97 million.
Okay.
And from a cost comparison standpoint, obviously, some of the service DCTA doesn't currently provide, but we currently have included in the FY21 budget 3.8 million in expenses that relate to Denton and Louisville fixed route, Denton and Louisville zone service, and then Highland Village lift service. So that would be roughly 1.2 million more than we currently have in the budget, but obviously with a much higher, much broader service area and additionally more service hours. Our FY21 budget included roughly 73,000 service hours for those specific areas, and just VIA's base service is 94,000 hours. So you can see the cost per hour differential between DCTA budgeted service versus VIA.
And am I correct? If no one uses it, then we actually don't incur the cost, so we could actually save money?
Correct, yes. Everything other than the upfront costs are based on service hours. So for all of these, if expectations are higher than actual true ridership and service hours, we would not incur those costs. We would need to budget for the full not to exceed amount.
Sure.
If service wasn't used, and we would have savings. Yes, sir.
And the total upfront cost is $128,000?
If we're also going to do the bike racks as well, it would be 165.
So is the number that you gave on the 3.8 million, is that COVID numbers? Is that, I mean, what did we budget for? Because I thought we were spending $8 to $9 million on bus service pre-COVID. And that may include the UNT contract, but the UNT contract's like $3 million or something like that. So what were we spending pre-COVID on the bus service?
Nicole, I'll have to defer to you on what service level was included.
For Denton and Louisville and Highland Village?
FY21.
Yeah, what was it? What was FY? What was pre-COVID budget?
I would have to pull exact numbers, but we can get that for you. Because FY21 is a bit of a hybrid of some pre-COVID and some post-COVID.
Yeah.
And while she's looking that up, I do want to mention, we talked about incremental upfront costs for VIA, but I know that from the DCTA side, there will be some incremental upfront costs that we still need to determine what those costs will be. But for things like the existing bus shelters that we have along different routes that may need to come up, if we need to put down new pads for some of these virtual stops that maybe have a higher ridership that might deem needing to have a concrete pad, stop post removal for bus stop signs along the routes. So those type of infrastructure costs, we will need to determine and bring back to the board. And then of course, there's the marketing side and the public involvement side of things too. And Nicole, Marissa, I know there were probably other things on this list, but that we would have to put that all together.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that when we looked at the first proposals, we were comparing them to, we were saying we're having savings of about $3 to $4 million, but that was based upon what bus services we were providing pre-COVID.
Sure. And what VIA has included in their proposal is it's roughly $41 per service hour. Our FY21 budget numbers equate to $52 per service hour. And so that difference in incremental, roughly $10 or $11 per service hour, again, based on VIA's proposal of 94,000 service hours, would be about $1 million difference. And then going back to higher levels of service, of course, would be an additional savings based on that delta of the service hour cost.
Yeah, if somebody, it doesn't have to be today, but because I know we did staff did or one of the consultants did a cost allocation model where they analyzed everything, and this was pre-COVID, And I thought I remembered the Connect Louisville and Highland Village cost, this is without UNT necessarily, was about $8 million. So it's somewhere that's already been done.
Well, and if I can, and I'm having trouble pulling up that file right now. I maybe have too many Excel files open. But the cost allocation model that was produced by TTI that we shared previously was a fully allocated cost, including DCTA administrative costs, all of DCTA employees, all of bus admin support functions. So like the NTMC HR team. And so obviously with transitioning to VIA, we would expect we would potentially have some staffing changes as far as support functions, but we didn't factor in those administrative costs on the DCTA side as far as applying that to this service, because like the folks on the call today, you'd still have a CEO regardless of whether some of this to VIA. So we didn't allocate those costs in this comparison, whereas the cost allocation model is every single dollar that DCTA spends across the board allocated to a service. So it's a slightly different, when we were trying to compare apples to apples, we did the cost of operators, cost of the vehicles and maintaining those vehicles, fuel, et cetera, to be able to compare that number to what VIA is offering to actually say what costs would be substituted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the biggest difference is there's roughly 20,000 hours more service that's being delivered, which is a good thing.
Yes.
You're covering a much larger service area than what we were ever able to cover with our fixed route, which is a good thing. Again, it's a tangible, but it's also an intangible in that you're reaching a lot more neighborhoods, a lot more customers, therefore ridership should go up. It's a very different service. And while you were correct, the number is higher. What's being shown here is kind of a maximum cost. The other thing which hasn't been shown, I don't know whether we have a slide today for it, is we want to look at the 4 years. So this is a 2 + 2 1-year options. Typically, when we look at a contract, we will ask the board to approve the full extent of the contract with the options being subject to implementation. But that you want the total value of the contract to be there. Yes, thank you, whoever pulled that up. I don't know, Marissa, did you do that?
Nope.
No. Okay.
This lady or Kayla.
All right, thank you. So this is kind of maximum exposure, I think has been explained by VIA. I don't believe, and the costs are going to be at this level unless we knock the cover off the ball with ridership and we're having to come back and talk about adding more vehicles. But it is a bit of a challenge in that the number of hours that is being proposed here is roughly 20,000 hours more, but the quality of the service and the reach, the access literally to the service is much better in this model than what we were able to afford through fixed route.
Okay. Yeah, so if there's a slide or if somebody could put together a white paper that basically memorializes what you just shared, because I think it's going to be important. I think what we've been trying to say is we're going to this particular type of service model because it's going to be more efficient and it's going to save money. So if it's not going to save money, which is okay, then I personally, I would like to be able to have at my fingertips just what you guys have been talking about so that I can justify saying we're going to be spending these additional dollars, but we're getting these additional services, which incrementally DCTA under its current paradigm could not even provide at this level. So I think if you could somehow put together, I don't know how else to say it, a sales sheet of, hey, this is why this is a better deal, because, and explain why that in the all costs, the cost allocation model, that, we're going to realize some savings from that, but we've just got to, unless it's been done and I haven't seen it, I've just missed it. I just would like to see a real detailed financial analysis of, we've got the financial analysis from VIA, but from DCTA on, okay, this is why we need to do this, because it's doing this, this, and this, and this is what it's going to cost us, or this is what it's going to save us. So if I
Sure.
missed that, I apologize. But I think that's going to be, because I've been under the impression we're saving $4 million. And so this is the first time I've heard that we're not, and I'm okay with that, but I need to somehow get my mind around, okay, then help me understand why in some presentations in the beginning, it was these savings, but it's not here. And I understand the rationale. I just need to see it. I
Sure,
just need
and
to see it explained.
The cost allocation model included both fixed and variable costs. And so what we've used in kind of our cost comparison for this purpose is just those variable costs that would fall off if we moved to a VIA service. And absolutely, to your point, from a cost efficiency standpoint, it is a lower cost per vehicle hour.
Yes.
Now, in total, based on a 20% higher number of vehicle hours, that then shifts over and it becomes more overall dollars. But from a vehicle hour standpoint, it's definitely cheaper. And so we will all put that together, and also the comparison with the cost allocation model to kind of circle that all back together.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Director White has her hand raised.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I was curious, what is the vehicle capacity on the VIA vehicles?
Sure, happy to take that one. So typically we're using a minivan that has 6 seats plus the driver available. We would obviously, during the pandemic, we would work with DCTA staff to figure out exactly how many riders we would include and what percentage of those seats we would use. Probably, I would estimate initially we would not use all of them, as we haven't been in most services. But that's the actual capacity of the vehicles.
Okay, and that relates, when we talk about $52 per service hour for DCTA, that's a larger vehicle, or? I'm just curious about that comparison.
Sure, it is based on just what one vehicle hour for DCTA, yes, may have 5, 10, 20 riders on it during that one vehicle hour, yes. And that's where the ability for VIA to offer shared rides is also helpful too, so that it's not just a one-to-one comparison. There is still some efficiency as far as that goes as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let's get back to our sort of trying to get, we got to wrap this part up. We still got 2 agenda items. I think 2 or 3 left for this meeting. All right, if we go back to the slide that shows the costs, please. And so one question I do have, which we haven't addressed actually, is in the base service. Well, maybe this is a question. I was going to make a comment. In the base service, we talked about a pilot program for connect routes 3 and 7. But then I asked for, once we got VIA's numbers, to take over routes 3 and 7, which, and I've said all this in an email, so it'll be nice to have it verified or not verified here with VIA on the line. It seemed like the cost to do that, based upon one of their proposals with it and one of their proposals without it, was about $1.4 million. Now that was with 15-minute headways. And I think DCTA staff provided the cost of DCTA for connect routes 3 and 7 were $500,000 with a 30-minute headway, or 45-minute, can't remember. And so I asked for, well, if we did a 15-minute headway, trying to compare. So I didn't know if in this base service, where are routes 3 and 7 in all the things that we've talked about here today?
So routes 3 and 7 for year 1, we have assumed that we will take on the off-peak demand for routes 3 and 7, but that routes 3 and 7 would continue to run and operate during peak hours. But that changes for year 2. So when we go to this 4-year projection, you can see that there's a pretty substantial increase between year 1 and year 2. Part of that is obviously COVID and pandemic related. But another part is that we are assuming that routes 3 and 7 will move to VIA.
Yeah, I'm going to be, I mean, if the first year, if there's a pilot program, okay, I'm not sure what that's costing us, but until I get some information, I mean, it seems like Route 3 and 7 connect. I'm going to be very hesitant to pay an extra $1 million for that without having a little bit more data and also a little bit more kind of similar comparison on headways and things like that. Because if we do have that much ridership on 3 and 7 and we can do it more efficiently, we need to figure out maybe some alternatives there, because that's a lot of money. And I'm not sure.
Chair Watts, if I may, we were able to model a 15-minute headway on routes 3 and route 7, utilizing the methodology that Marissa had mentioned at $52.09 per hour. We estimated that a 15-minute headway on routes 3 and 7 would cost DCTA $1.3 million.
Okay, all right, good. I appreciate that information. So I will need to digest that to be able to, so help me, so let's move back to the slide on the cost, because I'm going to need to know exactly, are we giving direction for year 1? We giving direction for year 2? Are we giving direction for the contract? So at some point, we need to understand when we give that direction, because I know we're giving direction for the public input and the service plan, but also there's some contractual terms that we've got to consider at some point. Okay, so.
And I'm happy to address that. We are going to be asking for approval or consideration for approval of what I would say would be like phase 1. We would like approval of phase 1 and phase 2. However, the board decides those a la carte options should be assigned. We would like during the public involvement process to not only take the phase that we would be launching in September, but also future phases so that we can have that opportunity to collect any feedback. And to TJ's point earlier, that we can conduct a Title VI analysis on the whole thing so that we're doing that up front. So that is the direction that we would like today.
Okay.
And
So
preferably not today, but for the 22nd, once we get all the feedback, my hope would be that we provide the guidance for all 4 years that we have, so that what the board would be approving is a all-in contract value. And it doesn't mean that we're obligated to spend those dollars with VIA, but what we don't want to do is get into a situation where we contract and then later we have additional add-ons that exceed more than 25% of the total contract value. So typically we would look at, if this is a 4-year award, 2 + 1 year options, what's typically standard with procurement is we would ask the board to award all 4 years, but only authorize with the budget the annual appropriation for that particular year. It would include the options so that if the board decided to add an option, that the value of the contract already has it. The other alternative would be that we come back to the board and we'd ask for a contract amendment. But when if we use federal dollars, there's a stipulation that you can only modify a contract up to 25% of its original value before it's considered outside of that cardinal change. And I would defer to council on that, but that's my experience with the contracts and how we would want to operate them.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, so today, go ahead, yes.
I would like to make a note. I believe Vice Chair Molina has returned. His name is in the participant list, so I just wanted to make note of that.
Okay, all right, fantastic. Well, welcome back. All right, so then to summarize, the direction you're looking for from the board today is to come to a consensus to give staff direction on phase 1 and 2, what's to be included, so that you can take that before the public, and it's a comprehensive. And then on April 22nd, it's staff's recommendation and desire that the board be prepared and in whatever data we need to make a decision to approve the contract based upon the original 2-year term and I think it's 2 one-year extensions for a total of 4 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, so then let's do that. So on phase 1, are there any objections on the phase 1 add-ons that we've discussed so far? With the one-time costs, the exclusion of the 123, 180. I don't believe there is. Hearing none, then let's move on to the phase 2 add-on. Which one of these, if any, would you want to be added into phase 1 at this time? I'll open it up for comment.
Well, I'll just start Sunday A train and Trinity Mills.
Okay. Sunday A train replacement and Trinity Mills. Okay. Any objections to that?
Mayor Watts, the only other piece that I would want to maybe have explored is I still like the idea of this whole service starting at 5 a.m. to sync up. So I would like to see what that would run us.
Okay. And I appreciate that because I did have that outstanding ask also of the additional, if we add in the boundaries for Dina. So yeah, so contingent upon those costs coming in, which I would like to analyze those as well. And I agree with you, TJ. I think that's something we need to know. Are there any, TJ, let's see, on the Castle Hills zone expansion, you want us to go ahead and start the sort of soft analysis, the paper analysis, Title VI, and those kinds of things to sort of get us ready once we're ready to implement that. If you guys annex, we've already done all the paperwork.
Yeah, my expectation is that I would like to see the same things that Sam would like to see moved into phase 1. The bottom 3, I think, can be a phase 2, but I think Castle Hills, there's definitely room to put some prep time in, as staff has also agreed.
Okay, wonderful. Any objections to that with Sunday A train replacement, Trinity Mills going into phase 1, whereas Castle Hills late night and access going into phase 2. However, with Castle Hills looking at getting that analysis started to sort of get a head start. Any objections to that? And that would be also with VIA coming back with the numbers for starting service at 5 a.m. and also what's the addition, if any, on sort of including that boundary for Dina. And if we could get those numbers, obviously, before the board meeting, then on the 22nd, we can incorporate, if we need to make changes to the contract value based upon those, then we can do that. Is that correct, Joe? We can make those changes. Even we're giving direction today, which isn't, we're not approving, quote unquote, a contract. We're giving direction, and then come the board meeting, if we have some additional costs or things that the board desires to be in there, we can do that.
Correct. And then depending on where we are at the board meeting, because we can always give the CEO the authority to negotiate and execute the contract with any additional changes or decisions that have come out of that board meeting.
Okay. Yeah, let's just make sure the postings are such that we have that flexibility.
Right.
Chris?
All right.
Chris, can I add something?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So if we're going to look at doing the extension of the time, the Highland Village hour extension, was not recommended. But if they're going to do some put some numbers together, I'd like to see what that would do. If you're going to extend the time to 5 a.m. anyway, then I'd like to see what those numbers would be.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thea, I guess you got that. You can figure that. Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions? So I will summarize what I hear as the direction. And if I'm incorrect, please someone speak up and share. It sounds like what I'm hearing is the direction is for phase 1. We include all that's here on the slide, of course, taking out the number that doesn't apply, option 1. But as part of that, VIA is going to do some analysis on if they're extending the hours to 5 a.m., what that cost is, not only just in general, but also to Highland Village on the non-recommended part, to give us some cost numbers on that, and also to provide some cost numbers on the Denia neighborhood kind of expansion on those boundaries. Included in phase one will be the Sunday A train replacement and the Trinity Mills replacement. But included for phase two will be Castle Hills zone expansion, late night service hours and access, with the Castle Hills zone expansion paperwork being started as far as Title VI analysis and all those things that we need to do up front in order to get ready to implement. And that's what we will be taking to the public for comment. Is that, staff, is that the direction, or do you need more direction than that?
That matches the notes that I've taken, in addition to the analysis of starting service at 5 a.m. and the revision of the Denia expansion. I also have that we will be looking at modifying the Castle Hills border, including the Josie 544 kind of access point, and that we need to work with Louisville to get in the GIS file for the exact boundaries. That we also need to model encouraging ridership on the A train, considering that Frankfurt Station option 2 is just a stopgap option. And that also will begin to model the access data so that we can help VIA determine a true not to exceed cost.
Yes, okay. And then the analysis of, and I guess VIA will do that, the analysis of the Highland Village.
Correct. I included that in the analysis of starting service at 5 a.m. That way we would just do that system wide.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions on this? Just want to make sure that we've got adequate direction for you, staff, to, because you're going to be going out and talking to the public. So it sounds like that we've given you enough direct direction to where, and of course, if something comes up and there's questions, always reach out to us, but want to make sure you get as comprehensive direction as possible. Okay.
Correct. This provides direction for both what we needed for the public involvement process, but also for the development of the task order that we plan to bring back on April 22nd.
Fantastic. All right, then we will, unless there's any objection, we will go to our next agenda item, which will be receive a presentation to discuss a task order with VIA for micro transit on-demand service delivery.
Nicole, you have the direction you need, right?
I believe so. I was just going to kind of recap, and there are a couple of additional items that I would like to cover. So
are you
as I
talking about,
mentioned before,
are you talking about under agenda item 1 still?
I'm on agenda item 2.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
So just to confirm, we will be bringing back a task order that aligns with the previous conversation that we just had. We'll be bringing that back for the April 22nd board meeting for board consideration. The components that we need included in order to develop that task order include several things that we've discussed today. So one, the approval of proposal number 4. So we have that direction. Agreement on the time frame. I think the discussion today about the phases and the September launch, I feel like we're all in alignment on that. And so that's necessary for the task order. The third component was the fleet mix. And so it seems that we're all aligned on the singular fleet mix. And then the last piece of it is the proposed service name. Staff is proposing the name Go Zone as the name for the service. We believe that Go really symbolizes the true nature of the service. You can go to school, go to work, you can go out, you can go to the A train, you can go home. So we feel like it has, from a marketability standpoint, it has a lot of positive things going for it. We've conducted some preliminary researches to make sure that, it's not being used elsewhere, and that, we would have the ability to use it. We also ran it up the flagpole with VIA, and they were in agreement that it made sense. And so if the board does agree to this service name, then we'll include the service name in our public involvement efforts. moving forward. It would also allow us to help to start working with VIA on kind of wrap design and things of that nature in the logistics phase. We just wanted to make sure that the board was in agreement with kind of the naming of the service. It's not an action item, it's just discussion only, but we would appreciate some guidance in that area so that we can continue to move forward and maintain our timing.
Okay, any comments? Everybody okay with that?
We'll take silence as a yes.
I'm going to say silence is agreement unless somebody speaks up. I usually don't like to do that, but I'm hearing no objections. Going to be like an auctioneer. DJ, it looked
Works
like you're.
for me. I'm not a marketer, so you know.
Yeah. Okay. All
Well,
right, then
that concludes this item. That provides
Okay.
staff all the direction that they need.
Fantastic. So we sort of covered a lot of this in our agenda item number 1. Good.
Yes.
All right, then we'll go with that. You bet. Agenda item 3, discuss and consider proposed promotional fare for micro transit on-demand service.
Thank you. I will try to be brief and then just answer any questions. But anytime we develop and implement a new service type, there's always the need to take a look at our existing fare structure to see if it makes sense. And typically we end up needing to make some revisions. So as we took a look through our existing fare structure, we had some prime goals we wanted to make sure that we accomplished during this process, and mainly to minimize the risk of unintended impacts to our passengers as they adopt this new service mode. I think we would all agree that we really want to see a lot of adoption. We want to see a smooth transition from fixed route service to this new service with as minimal hiccups for the passenger and really focus on the passenger experience. So as riders are adopting the new mode of service, they're likely to have some new travel patterns, especially as we're moving through the pandemic. We would have a new fare. And with all of the changes, we really want to focus on our initial outreach efforts to help educate the passengers on the service, how the service is changing, how it impacts them, what that means for their daily movement throughout the cities. And by focusing on that instead of some new fare structure, we think that will help with some adoption. So what we're recommending is the proposed fare, that structure, I guess, if you will, slide please. And in this, it would allow, by just doing a promotional fare and not doing a formal change of the fare structure, it allows our passengers to continue to use the existing fare structure that they're used to using. It would allow us to continue to collect some additional data and do some analysis, which would help us in bringing a formal fare structure to the board for adoption in the near future. We would also be able to include a lot of questions during the public involvement period that I do believe is beginning next month. Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong. And in like customer surveys and then the conversations, we can obtain information from our passengers. What is their willingness to use the service and willingness to pay? Like what type of fare would they be willing to pay? And get some feedback from our passengers before we make any major fare structure changes. So this proposed fare would leverage the existing fare structure. So you can see everything on the left is an existing fare type, except for the new single ride. And then we have simply incorporated VIA credits for ride on VIA. So a round trip ride on GoZone, start using that, would take 2 single ride credits in order to do a round trip. So by using our existing fare structure, incorporating these ride credits into the existing fare media, we think that covers all of the utilization of passes that our passengers are currently using. By implementing a single ride fare type, again, that one would be new, and that could be the promotional fare. What that would allow is a passenger to purchase 1 credit at a time. The 75 cents would be equivalent if a passenger were to do a one-way trip on a bus route, it would be 75 cents. Currently, the lowest fare in denomination for a bus bus route would be the AM PM pass, and that would be at least one round trip of $1.50. So we really were trying to keep the single ride pass equivalent to what passengers might be paying for a bus ride. One thing to note in this promotional fare overview is on the local AM PM pass, VIA does have some concerns about how they might be able to use that existing pass that DCTA has. So they are exploring the potential of how could VIA make that pass available within their app, but it still could be available through the ticket outlets, GoPass, and Cash. We also kept our unbanked passengers in mind as we discussed this proposed promotional fare structure. And we wanted to ensure that the locations that they could currently purchase passes or where they pay a cash fare, that those are still available. So that single ride, 75-cent local fare to ride Go Zone could be paid with exact cash upon boarding the Go Zone vehicle. And then cash would also be accepted for the day pass, like at the Downtown Denton Transit Center, and then through ticket vending machines at all of the A-Train stations. I think that pretty much sums up what we're proposing today. We are asking for the board to approve this proposed promotional fare. Since we're going with a phased approach, what staff would truly recommend is for the 6 months of implementation of phase 1, operate this promotional fare. And then as phase 2 begins, then start the 6-month promotional fare for phase 2. And then again, we will bring a proposed total revised fare structure to the board once we're able to obtain some more information from passengers and from the data. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a, I guess, a process question. You'd said you want the board's approval. You're wanting direction. Are we posted for approving this? It says
this is posted as an action item.
It says discuss and consider proposed promotional fare for microtransit on demand. Joe, is that? I mean, to discuss and consider. So consider is the action item.
Yeah, you're
trigger word.
You're considering the proposed promotional fare for microtransit on demand. So discuss, considers your action for that proposed promotional fare.
Okay. All right. So you're saying it's proper posting for the board to take an official vote.
Correct.
Okay. All right. If we could in the future make that a little bit more, I mean, discuss and give staff direction and approve. Take something that's a little bit more specific. That would be helpful. Okay. So any questions on this for staff?
Maybe I'm just not understanding because I'm not the brightest bulb on the candelabrum. What's the reduced fare?
So reduced fare is for those, if you see the note at the bottom, for those seniors that are 65 and over, have disabilities, Medicare card holders, there is not a quote discounted fare for the new service. What the discount truly is you buy an existing pass and then you get a bonus of round trip credits to ride the new service.
I'm sorry, I'm dense. I don't understand a single thing you just said.
So Christina, is it essentially that exhibit 1 that's in the packet?
Which is what's on the screen currently.
Yes.
So this would
The
be
local fare is 75 cents. We're proposing to leave it the same, or we're proposing to eliminate it?
Okay, now I understand your question. So we are proposing to leave the existing fare media exactly the same price as it currently is. What the added bonus or promotion would be is that in addition to purchasing one of the passes that currently exist at the regular fare, which, for example, the local AM, let's use the day pass. For the day pass, you currently get to ride A-Train service unlimited all day. You get to ride Connect service unlimited all day. That would remain intact. The promotion would be the additional 2 single ride credits you would get to ride on the new service. And if you decide that you want to take more than those 2 single ride trips on the new Go Zone service, you could purchase additional rides through the new 75-cent promotional fare that we've added to this structure.
TJ, if I could help. On the reduced fare, so we do offer a reduced fare for the day pass and for the local AM PM pass, and it is 50% of what is listed under local fare. So that would remain the same. So if somebody qualifies for a reduced pass and they were looking at purchasing a local AM PM pass, they would purchase their local AM PM pass for 75 cents, but we would still include the 2 single ride credits.
So if I buy $1.50 local fare today, are you telling me that you're going to give me credits for 2 single rides in September?
Christina, you're muted.
So once the service begins, you will get, when you purchase that pass, if you purchase those passes today, they will not be valid by the time the new service begins.
Okay.
So when you purchase the pass in September, once the new service has begun, you get all the same services that you get today. The promotion is that you also get rides on the new service.
But you don't have the old service, so why would you get any service?
We
So
do.
During the test period, we'll still have those routes 3 and 7 offerable as well. And so the local AM PM, if it's purchased at 7 a.m., it's good until noon that same day. And so you would have 2 single ride credits to use during that open to 12 p.m. period or 12 p.m. to close of service period. And then likewise with the day pass, it would be good that day. So once the pass is expired, those credits don't carry over, which is why also on the longer term passes, it shows that there's no daily rollover of those credits. It's just incorporating some via ride credits in lieu of the current amount of Connect service that riders would have access to today.
Because our local passes all include A-Train service on them. You cannot buy just a bus fare, a bus pass. Everything includes, it's local, so it's all inclusive. And while there's a pause,
maybe it's just me, and I'm sorry. I'm being extremely dense here. September comes along. My residents don't have Louisville and Highland Village, for that matter, don't have a bus option. The only place that has a bus option is 3 and 7 in Denton.
Right. So if there is a community member that lives in Louisville or Highland Village, and they do not have any desire to use the A-Train, then a day pass may not be worth their while. So then what they might want to do is just purchase the 75-cent local fare each direction to try the new service. So it'd be $1.50 for a round trip pass.
Okay.
But if they plan to also ride the A-Train, it might make more financial sense for them to purchase the day pass, because then they get unlimited trips on A-Train, plus they get ride credits to ride the new service. And I would like to correct, sorry, I have a typo in my slide. The day pass, it would be 4 single ride trips, not 2. So they get 2 full round trips in a day pass for $3, plus unlimited rides on the A-Train. And this is great dialogue, TJ, because when Nicole and her team go out to promote this during the discussions, we need to make sure that we verbalize everything to make it very clear. Again, having a brand new service and a totally new fare would be extremely difficult. So we're trying to keep it simple by leveraging the existing fare structure we have and just adding the credits for the new service.
Okay, so where I think I'm getting wrapped around the axle is promotional.
So the reason why it's a promotional is because currently the fare structure does not include these extra credits to ride the VIA service. And currently the single ride 75-cent fare does not exist. So by calling this,
but I mean, a new fare is not a promotional fare.
promotional means it's temporary. So if we do this for the first 6 months,
Well, why wouldn't
we
you call
may-
it a temporary fare?
from the marketing standpoint, promotional is more of an incentive than temporary. But we would
Well,
be more than
there's
happy to
some-
take.
And
forward-
I think that, and again, the promotional we use because FTA allows transit agencies to provide what they consider promotion, like fair promotions, without having to go out and do an equity analysis on the fare piece of it. So the thought was to leverage that 6-month capability that the FTA provides us so that we could collect real-time passenger data to help inform a completely new fare structure.
Okay. Sure. I'm not going to waste anybody else's time with my confusion anymore because I'm just not there, but that's okay. Whatever you guys need to make it so that people understand that when September 1 hits or whatever it is, this is what it costs for rides, and try and keep that as least muddy as possible. I'm good with. I think one other thing is 3 and 7, chances are those aren't going to be temporary based on some of the new numbers that we're seeing as far as ridership and density. So I don't know if going out there and saying that that's a temporary is necessarily a pilot, but that may be tangential.
Okay, any other questions on the fare on agenda item 3 on the proposed fare for on-demand service?
So again, we are asking that the board approve this, basically this slide with the correction that the day pass would include 4 single ride credits.
Okay, all right. If we could pull the slide down so I can see the full panel. All right, any more discussion? If not, the chair would entertain action on this item.
I would move that the fare schedule be approved with the correction that Ms. Holcomb pointed out with regard to the change from 2 to 4 credits on the day pass.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye and or raising your right hand. Aye. Let me see if okay. TJ, I didn't see.
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay, all right. So the motion carries, I guess what, 4 to, how do we classify that, Joe?
I mean, really abstention is since there's not a legal abstention, it's just it's a vote against, so just be 4 to 1.
What?
Yes.
Well, that's a crazy setup.
Yeah. So the bylaws don't have the ability for an abstention?
No.
Okay, all right.
So if I walked out and weren't here for the vote, I would be voting no.
Do you want to walk out? No, you'd be absent for the vote.
Then I'll be absent.
Yeah. You want to, never mind.
Okay, well, we need to get
I
this
just
right.
turned off my monitor. You don't know if I'm here or not. How there?
TJ just acknowledged that he's present but absent.
Yes, there it is. There it is. Well played, Sam.
All right, so I want to get this right. Joe, how do we proceed? I mean, TJ, if you don't want to vote, if you don't want to have a denial, then what we can do.
Then I'm fine with putting it up. I am not informed enough to be able to vote yes on this. That's I have not got my head wrapped around this. So I feel like me putting any vote on this is not fair to the folks that put me here because I don't know what I don't know.
And we can go ahead and note that also if you want in the minutes that is why you are voting no, not that you're against it, but you just did not have enough information at the time to vote in favor for it.
Well, I probably have plenty of information. It's just none of it's making any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm going to mute myself.
I'll vote yes. Let's move on.
Okay. All right. So we've got a motion and a second, and I believe the vote was 5-0 with some comments that will be reflected in the minutes. Agenda item number 4, presentation and discussion of potential revenue impacts.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Lindsay. If you would go to slide 14. Included in your packet on pages 84 and 85 is a memo that outlines the 3 revenue streams that would be potentially impacted by a change in service type moving from a fixed route service to the demand response service, on-demand microtransit offered by VIA. Just some very high level estimates based on our current budgeted ridership. We currently budget in the FY21 budget a fare per rider of $86. That's each year essentially by taking our total fare sales, dividing that by the number of riders. In Christina's example in the last item, we have a local AM PM pass that's $1.50. When we created that pass, the intention was that 4 to 6 hour time frame should give people enough time to take one round trip. And so therefore that's 75 cents per trip. We budget 86 cents. This also captures all annual passes, monthly passes to get an average fare per rider. What VIA is proposing, or what we are proposing under the 75 cent single ride, and then the AM PM that would be 2 credits, would equate to 75 cents per ride. The difference of that 11 cents multiplied by our FY21 budgeted ridership equates to roughly $30,000. Again, that's assuming that we don't have any incremental increase in ridership. So, the board has talked about adding expanded zones and increasing service hours from what we currently have in the budget. The assumption being, of course, that ridership would increase with the accessibility and convenience of this on-demand service. And so just for very conservative estimates and without capturing an increase in ridership that we would obviously hope to gain from this change, that decrease of 30,000 would be what we expect as the potential passenger revenue decrease. Are there any questions before we move on to the other two? Okay, contract service revenue. We have one contract currently in place with the University of North Texas that includes a $49,000 Connect access fee. UNT pays that flat $49,000 and it allows their students, faculty, and staff to ride any Connect service without paying a fare. They show their student or faculty ID. DCTA staff is in conversations with UNT, of course, to communicate to them the potential change by removing most of this Connect service and moving to an on-demand model, and looking through other options with how UNT would like to use that funding for additional mobility options. So as of right now, we don't expect any change in revenue associated with that. It's probably just a change in service provided for that dollar amount.
Yeah, have we, because I know we've talked about how we determine on routes 3 and 7, how many students are using those bus routes. Have we found a way to try to do that, even if it's just sort of primitive, because it's $47,000, but we're also spending $500,000 for routes 3 and 7. And if you've got a majority of those riders are students, I'm not so sure we need to reallocate that to anything else. But anyway, just so, have we been able to determine that yet? Or
yes, sir. So we began tracking basically passengers related to UNT versus not related pretty closely after our last board meeting. And so on the April 22nd agenda, we have an information item that will share a preliminary report, but we'll just continue to track. We'll have our contractor continue to track UNT versus non-UNT on an ongoing basis and continue to bring the board that report.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Okay, and then the last item is not only the most complicated, but also the highest potential revenue impact, and that is the federal grant funding. Our 5307 formula funding through FTA is based on a variety of metrics, one of which is vehicle revenue miles. And so there's 4 separate sections that compile our formula funding. The first being service area funding. This information is taken from the 2010 census. to be updated, of course, with the new census when that information is finalized. But the FTA uses information from that census for this first service area funding number. And so that stays somewhat stagnant regardless of the amount of service that we provide in an area, since it's based on population and area. Vehicle revenue miles is the next one. It's a factor based on the revenue miles operated. So if we reduce fixed route and don't replace it with the same amount of revenue miles under a demand response model, that could potentially impact our funding. The incentive funding is essentially based on efficiency. So it takes the number of passenger miles traveled and then multiplies that by the number of passenger miles traveled per dollar of operating costs. So, so the more efficient a service is and the more passenger miles we can get per dollar of operating costs, the more incentive funding we get. And then the last one, unrelated to any of the changes that we're talking about with bus right now, but to get the full scope of formula funding, is directional mile funding, and that's solely based on rail fixed guideway. On the next slide, I've started to break down, and I know for the sake of time, there are a lot of numbers here, and I've tried to break down the exhibit that's on pages 86 through 89 into more digestible sections for discussion. I am happy to go through each piece, but I know we're past time, so I will keep going until someone stops me, but feel free to interrupt.
Okay.
Here.
All right. Yeah, any questions?
So this service area funding, again, population and population per area and square miles, essentially this piece would stay the same in any of the 4 scenarios that we've included in the packet on pages 86 through 89. The next slide shows the vehicle revenue mile funding. And this is important to note. You can see where we've shown fixed route and demand response. All of these services have the same factor applied to them, and these factors are established by the FTA. So if we reduce 1 vehicle revenue mile of fixed route and replace it with 1 vehicle mile of demand response, there's no net impact to our formula funding. The differences come in if we pull more fixed route than demand response miles that we put back on the street. And so of our $6 million in formula funding, 1.5 million is specifically related to the number of miles of service. And that's for both bus and rail. And then I've just put a note on the bottom too to acknowledge we talk about an NTD reporting, National Transit Database. All of our operating data comes from this NTD report. So, so the information that we put on this report is what then impacts the formula funding that we receive in future years. And to circle back to the conversation that we had, I believe March 10th, we discussed that due to COVID, our formula funding was going to be based on these FY19 NTD numbers for the next several years, that they were freezing our formula funding metrics due to ridership changes due to COVID. So all of the information here is from the FY19 NTD reporting that should be in place for the next 2 years because of that change. On the next slide is the incentive funding. And this is the piece that the more efficient a service is, the more funding is allocated to it. All it really shows here is that we get most of our incentive funding for van pool, and that's primarily because from the start of the trip to the end of the trip, the van pool has most of the time the max capacity of riders in it for the full trip. And so there's and then our expenses are covered partially by the riders themselves. We split those costs 50-50. So you can see there a large portion of that. So again, another roughly 1.5 of our 6 million is related to this incentive funding. And most of that is related to van pool and then rail. On the next slide is the directional mile funding. Again, this is solely related to rail, won't be impacted at all with changes that we make on bus. If we extended the rail line, that 42.6 is 1 round trip of our rail line. And so that line would increase if we extended the rail line, but nothing else would change that. And then of course the factor is determined by FTA. On the next slide is just a summary to show these are the two lines in the middle, the two sections of FTA formula funding that would potentially change with a change in service level. So on the next slide, I've shown I have a couple different scenarios. So the first is proposed removal of all connect routes, leaving 3 and 7 intact. The net impact of that reduction in fixed route service, assuming no incremental increase in demand response service, would be 376,000. And that is shown in detail on page 87 in your packet. On the next slide is the proposed removal of all connect routes, including 3 and 7. That difference would be a reduction of 443,000. And then the last slide, which equates with the information in your packet on the last page, would be a proposed addition of VIA service. And what we've done here, again, the detail in page 89 on your packet, is taken some proposed ridership numbers that VIA originally included during roundtable discussions, using that ridership information, a flat $1 mile average trip per rider, and factored that into the formula to acknowledge that we're not just pulling fixed route service. Of course, we're adding back this on-demand microtransit service, but without having an estimate of vehicle revenue miles or how long trips are going to be. This we feel like is a very conservative estimate for that. And so with that very baseline assumption, the proposed addition of VIA service would result in an additional 199,000 in increased formula funding. And again, that was just based on ridership included in the base service. With the additional add-ons that the board has asked us to explore, of course, we would expect those service numbers and ridership numbers to go up, which would then increase the formula funding. And so that's where, I mean, it all kind of depends on utilization of service. Now, from a comparison to fixed route, where we're paying to operate a vehicle regardless of how many people are on it, through the many conversations today that we won't be incurring costs for VIA unless it's utilized, some of that will offset any additional, any loss in funding associated with that, because we won't be incurring costs if we don't have passengers that we would then get credit for through some of these formulas. So TJ, I know you had asked specifically about the impact on formula funding. Of course, it's very dependent on the length of trips and how well this is utilized. So of course, marketing it will be super important for us to do to ensure that we, that we get wide acceptance. But with that, that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Marissa, the last two slides you looked at, not the last one, but the one before that, I interpreted that as a worst case scenario. And I interpreted the very last slide as a realistic worst case scenario. Is that correct?
Yes. So yes, the full removal of fixed route at the 443K would be assuming ridership goes away and none comes back. And the service goes away and none comes back. And so that's, yes, the worst case. And then the last one, acknowledging that of course we'll have some service that for all of our riders that used to take Connect will now take VIA, and what would that look like instead? That's what we would expect from kind of a baseline VIA service, at least at the onset. And that's where those factors where I mentioned fixed route to demand response. If we have one vehicle revenue mile less of demand of fixed route that we've moved to demand response, there's no net impact in terms of the vehicle revenue mile funding because they apply the same factor to both types of service.
Got it. So it's kind of all in. Worst case scenario, we're looking at about $500,000 in revenue loss. Realistic worst case scenario, we're looking at about $300,000 revenue loss all in.
Out of a
And
total of $6 million of this funding. And then this is just one portion of our funding that we get from FTA, but it's the only portion that's related to bus service.
yeah, the only portion that will be affected by this change.
Yep.
Okay. And so, and this doesn't really take into account the fact that the shift we're making allows us to reduce costs if service is not used.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, any other questions? Comments? I don't believe there's any action items on this, correct?
No, I appreciate the numbers though. It helps give me context.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, if not, we'll move on. Future agenda items and board member requests. We've got our next board meeting April 22nd. Any information or comments on this item?
No, just, well, I guess I do, talking. No, I think, Chris, you asked kind of for our next board meeting to kind of have like an analysis of the overall impact of this decision. And I would just ask that maybe we include in that 2 or 3 realistic scenarios based on assumptions of ridership, so that the public can see kind of what we anticipate the impact of this shift will be financially for the organization. And
Okay.
and I think you were kind of asking for a simplified format. But if you weren't, I would.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's all.
Okay. Yep, great. I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments on this item, future agenda items and board member requests? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to reports on items of community interest. I don't have any. Does staff have any or any board members?
Nothing from staff.
Colleagues, any reports on items of community interest? If not, we'll move on to, I don't believe we have anything for executive session. Anybody want to go into closed session on any of the items that we've discussed today? Hearing none. We're still in open session. I don't believe we have any other items to discuss. Any other comments?
I just want to thank the board for all of the feedback and the dialogue today. Very helpful feedback that you gave to staff, and we will go and get the additional information that was requested. So thank you for your participation today.
You bet.
I
Thank
agree.
you.
I agree. It was very focused, tremendous feedback by the board. I also want to thank staff for all their hard work in preparing for this meeting.
Yeah, thank you, staff. Thanks to Bia also. Thank you, Raymond.
All right. Joe, I never can remember. Do we need a motion to adjourn or no?
You are not required to have a motion to adjourn. You can just adjourn the meeting.
All right. Unless I hear any more comments or objections to adjourning, we will adjourn this meeting of the DCTA Board of Directors at 1:43 p.m. on April the 7th, 2021. Thank you all. Great meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.